Chapter 161, Easter, The Barrow's Transcendence. "Ted, I want to take every class," Hermione declared, eyes raw and determined like someone betting everything on a single roll. Ted took her hand and guided her into a seat. "Don't be like this, Hermione. Haven't I told you, not every bit of knowledge needs to be chased at once. Your decision is impulsive and unnecessary." He looked at her. "Answer me honestly, do you really need to take Muggle studies?" Hermione opened her mouth to argue, but Ted's steady gaze made the words die on her tongue. Lying to him was impossible. He could see through it as easily as Snape could. Ted tried a gentler approach. "You've seen the borrowed textbook, right? Anything they teach to first years is so superficial even a Muggle primary schooler would yawn. It's common sense recycled from decades ago. They really ought to update it." Hermione had to admit he was right. The Muggle facts in that book were childishly basic, like hearing a distant country questioning whether people could afford eggs or have cell phones. The first time she'd read it, she'd felt her intelligence insulted. The course seemed pointless. Ted pushed on. "And divination and arithmancy? Do you actually trust them?" Hermione hedged. "I believe a little." Her "a little" was the kind of belief you give horoscopes, polite curiosity, not conviction. In the magical world, many were skeptical of divination. True, accurate foresight was extraordinarily rare. The most famous modern seer, author of Unveiling the Future Through the Clouds, could only divinate fragments. Her predictions were often ambiguous. You only made sense of them in hindsight. Talent, usually hereditary, played the decisive role. Divination classes, therefore, taught the basics more than true prophecy. Dumbledore, famous as he was, had been skeptical of divination too. His old mistress could glimpse pieces of the future with her sea-blue eyes. One reason Grindelwald had been so convinced. But prophetic glimpses could mislead as well as inform. Even Dumbledore had seen how prophecy and belief could create the very events they warned of. Voldemort's obsession with a prophecy led him to act in ways that ultimately brought about his downfall. All of Dumbledore's later schemes were designed to exploit that feedback loop. Plant belief, nudge choices, let fate fold in on itself. As for course selection, Ted had a practical suggestion. Try all the classes for a while, then decide. He also planned to ask Professor McGonagall about the time turner. "Just to look at it," he said. "Tomorrow's Easter. Let's choose after the holiday. Relax, there's plenty of time." Easter wasn't a major holiday, but a day off was rare, and the students were ecstatic. The year had already been dramatic. 2 Chamber of Secrets episodes, Lockhart's dueling club, his Valentine's Day fiasco. Everyone needed a break. The day before, pupils from all houses, even some third-year Slytherins and their friend Lothar, had begged Ted to organize something festive. "Last Valentine's Day was amazing," they'd said. Ted agreed. He worked with the house elves on a lavish 12-course feast, recruited helpful Hufflepuffs to learn kitchen tricks. The house elves grumbled that anyone daring to leave the kitchens should learn 10 years' worth of recipes first, and arranged for each house to perform 1 or 2 acts. He couldn't be the solo star every time. On Easter, the Great Hall was busy from lunchtime. The long tables pushed to the sides, a wide space cleared in the middle. After Valentine's, dance lessons had suddenly become the fashion, and groups of boys and girls swirled around, cheeks flushed, sometimes stepping disastrously on each other's feet, which drew laughter from watching classmates. By evening, before the sun had fully set, the students arrived in force. Some wore odd costumes. Transfiguration suites were in short supply, so to anyone uninformed it looked like a masquerade. Ted lit strings of fairy lights with a small wave. Another gesture set off a run of boar-shaped fireworks. The first few startled younger pupils into flying to the floor, until everyone realized the boars were enchanted illusions and exploded into laughter. 2 warming acts opened the evening. Gryffindor put on a quartet, Harry, Neville, Ron, and a 4th, whose earnest, off-key singing felt more like comic banter than a recital, but it was all for fun. Others followed with flutes, violins, and more experimental instruments, some genuinely artistic, others sounding like a shop full of rattling pans. But the mood was warm and silly. Then the feast. 12 generous dishes appeared at once, platters piled high. Students cheered and dug in. After half an hour, Ted climbed the stage for his own performance. He didn't sing this time. He played Summer from Kikujiro on piano, When the last note faded, the applause was thunderous. Ted's holiday task pinged in his mind and then in the air. Ding! Task completed. Splendid Easter. Reward, 250 XP. Item, Moonlight Stone. Item card effect. Summons a wisp of moonlight to follow the target, making them dazzlingly luminous. Duration, 3 minutes. Cooldown, 1 hour. Note, all eyes are on me. I have an announcement to make. It was basically a magical spotlight. Ted grinned at the idea of being a star. The banquet wound down, and everyone returned to their dorms. On the way back up to Ravenclaw Tower, Ted and his friends were halted by a ghost blocking the corridor. A Ravenclaw pupil nearby named who it was, the Bloody Baron, gravely stained with silver-white spectral blood, the imposing house ghost of Slytherin. He had a fearsome reputation. Even Peeves tended to think twice at the mention of his name. The Baron stared at Ted. Ted stepped forward. "Baron, can I help you?" The ghost seemed to come to life after several seconds. "Where is Helena?" he asked. Ravenclaws behind Ted murmured in confusion. "Who's Helena?" "Never heard of her." "The one you call the Grey Lady," the Baron repeated. "Where is she?" Now the whispers swelled into recognition. "The Grey Lady?" "Oh, haven't seen her in ages." Ted lowered his voice. "You know, she faced her past and chose to move on." The Baron's expression shifted into something unreadable, a tangled mix of sorrow and relief. "Did she mention me when she left?" he asked, aching and hopeful at once. Ted shook his head slowly. "She didn't mention you. It was enough that she hadn't come back for revenge." Understanding dawned on the Baron like a strange light. He laughed, a wild, half-sobbing sound that made the hairs on the student's arms stand up. "She didn't mention me. She has forgotten me. I understand. I understand." His voice rose to a howl that was frightening in its frenzy. Ted had the reflex to step forward and grab him, to yell that he didn't understand anything. Heavens, what did the Baron think he knew? But before he could, the ghost's spectral form brightened. A soft radiance suffused him. He puckered, and with a faint, almost musical sound, "Bew," he vanished. Ted's breath caught. He'd seen echoes of this kind of thing before, but never so plainly. The Bloody Baron had transcended in front of them. Around him, students stared, stunned, eyes wide. A hush fell. It wasn't just that the Baron had disappeared, it was that Ted had been the one to witness, and perhaps to bring about, this impossible ending. 162. New Victim. The next day, the whole castle buzzed with a strange new rumor. Ted had talked the Bloody Baron to death. Naturally, that didn't make sense. Ghosts couldn't die twice, so the story quickly shifted. Ted had spoken the Bloody Baron into thin air. A few more literate students corrected them. "That's transcendence, not vanishing. Can you be less ignorant?" Ted only shrugged. "Exactly. Try explaining it to people who haven't finished primary school." By afternoon, the version everyone told was even more dramatic. Ted, with nothing but his mouth, had made the Bloody Baron ascend. Word spread among the ghosts that some small wizard at Hogwarts could send spirits onto the next world with a single word. As you might expect, that attracted more ghosts. A 1,000-year-old school already held a lot of them. Now out-of-town apparitions drifted in, all peeking and whispering around Ted. He was afraid to go to the abandoned classrooms for fear they would catch him mistreating the monkeys and the White Mouse during his experiments. This couldn't last. Hogwarts was a school of magic, not a school of ghosts. Hundreds of specters hovering around every corridor turned the place into a perpetual festival and made the students too distracted to attend lessons. Professor McGonagall had no choice but to take the problem to Dumbledore. In the headmaster's office, she was blunt. "Albus, what do you think of Ted?" McGonagall hadn't come to report Ted. She'd come to ask Dumbledore to clear the ghosts, and she flared at the implication. "Dumbledore, this isn't Ted's fault." Dumbledore put his hands up in a calming gesture. "Calm down, Minerva. I'm not blaming him. I'm only curious about how he behaves." She bristled but complied. "He can be mischievous, but he's a good student, intelligent, studious, and he commands a lot of respect among his peers. He even organized the Easter activities. 4th and 5th years were ready to take orders from him." McGonagall kept talking, and Dumbledore nodded thoughtfully. "I understand. Leave it to me. I'll convince the ghosts to go. I know enough about what happened." Dumbledore had met Ted in front of the Room of Requirement before Christmas, when Ted had told the whole story of Ravenclaw and Helena's transcendence. From that, Dumbledore had pieced together how the Bloody Baron had moved on. Yes, Ted had helped Helena resolve her obsession, and when the Baron learned of her choice, he was forced to face his own. The transcendence had more to do with those two than with Ted acting as some supernatural ferryman. Ghosts persisted because their obsessions hadn't ended. They couldn't simply be talked away. Other ghosts looking for Ted were wasting their time. He wasn't Jin-san from Yorozuya. The Gryffindors, however, had another fear, nearly headless Nick. With Ravenclaw's and Slytherin's resident ghosts gone and Hufflepuff's Fat Friar reportedly petrified, Nick was the only house ghost left inside the school. The younger Gryffindors suddenly felt the need to protect him. Nick, flattered by his new popularity, regaled them with stories of glory. Once a magical consultant to a Muggle king, how court life had let him relieve himself wherever he pleased, and the cause of his death, a tragic mistake involving a Muggle noblewoman's buck teeth and a fang-growing spell. He'd been drunk, passed out, woke in prison, and during his beheading, the executioner, also quite tipsy, kept hacking with an unsharpened axe until a strip of flesh still clung to his neck. That guilt, the sense of unworthy death, could easily be an obsession, the students decided, and they begged him for more tales. His anecdotes beat Professor Binz's dry lessons by a mile. Questions flew. Did court ladies really not wear underwear? Nick laughed and rambled on, and for a time things were lighter, until a scream shredded the merriment. They all ran. Colin Creevey, a first year, sat on the floor, shaking and holding his camera. He pointed at a statue propped against a wall. It had once been a girl with 2 braids. Lavender Brown was petrified, pressed against the wall as if supporting herself, hands frozen in the act of holding something. Chaos broke out. News traveled fast. Within 10 minutes, everyone knew. Lavender was the 3rd victim, not counting the Fat Friar. First Clara from Ravenclaw, then Justin from Hufflepuff, now Lavender from Gryffindor. Panic spread. Footprints and a fallen object near Lavender's hands had been trampled by the excited Gryffindors. Whatever she'd been clutching had probably been kicked away. They had no idea what she'd been holding when she saw the thing that petrified her. Suspicion sharpened into blame. Why weren't any Slytherins among the victims? The rumor became accusation. The Chamber of Secrets had been opened again, and Slytherin's heir wanted to clear the school of Muggleborns. Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, and Ravenclaw students united in unprecedented hostility towards Slytherin. The Slytherins, unsurprisingly, responded with stony silence and their own bickering over who was most deserving of the heirship. At meals, the houses traded glances like daggers. Ted, however, didn't remember Lavender being petrified in the way the original story went. In the book, Hermione had been the clever one to deduce the monster and then was petrified for her trouble. She'd been lucky to use a small mirror to look around corners. Now Lavender was down instead of Hermione, and that changed the timeline. Things were starting to branch unpredictably. Ted rounded up his friends in the secret base. Everyone, I won't waste words. The castle is in real danger. We're all at risk. They took it seriously. Jerry, the white mouse, drew his head in near his shoulders and swore he'd stop wandering at night. I'm the most sensible, he announced. Harry grew quiet, eyes red. I saw Lavender in the dormitory, he said. She complained about pimples, and I tried to sell her your pimple-free stuff. I saw her about an hour and a half before she was found. Ted's stomach dropped. The pipes and secret ways in the castle connected everywhere. The monster could appear from any hidden passage. He'd been watching Ginny Weasley closely. His spirit crystal servant, Parker, had tracked her almost constantly, everywhere except the girls' dormitories and washrooms. Ginny's behavior and health looked normal. If the diary wasn't with Ginny now, and she wasn't showing signs of possession, then where had it gone? From the original events Ted remembered, Ginny discovered her own odd behavior, threw the diary into the loo, and Harry later found it. Ginny then stole it back. Ted had assumed the only thing that had changed was the identity of the savior, and that after it was stolen from the boys' dormitory, the diary would end up back with Ginny. Now, the diary seemed to be missing entirely. Ted produced several small amber mirrors. Here, these are for everyone. They were not ordinary trinkets. Each mirror had a bronze-inlaid silver frame with a sleek, almost sci-fi design and a faintly glowing rune carved into the rim. Jerry squealed with delight. Neville and Harry looked stunned. In the wizarding world, even commonplace items tended to be crude. These were luxury. Hermione, holding a pair up to her eyes, studied Ted with a new intensity. "Do you know something?" she asked. Ted smiled wryly. "I have some guesses." "Guesses about the Chamber of Secrets?" she pressed. "About the monster in the chamber," Ted corrected. "I think it petrifies by direct eye contact." "By its gaze?" Harry asked quickly. The others leaned in. Ted nodded. When Clara was petrified, her glasses were broken. Justin could have seen it through the fat friar. Translucent ghosts see differently. Lavender was holding a mirror, Harry finished. She saw the creature's reflection. Ted confirmed it. "Whatever it is, it petrifies by direct eye contact. So I made these goggles. They protect the eyes. They have other functions too. Let me show you." The demonstration that followed lasted the entire day. Chapter 163, Super Sight Deployed. Ted's anti-death goggles stunned his friends. He explained that the goggles were remarkably effective at defending against gaze-based magic, and that they had several useful auxiliary functions. One of them was called Super Aim. Super Aim consumed a lot of magic from the wearer, but its effects were excellent. Any magical or moving target would be marked by the goggles' automatic tracking crosshair. It could foil camouflage like a ghillie suit and track moving targets to help with wand aiming. The goggles also had a detection function that displayed the target's magic level. Curious, Harry put the goggles on and tested Ted. Magic level 530, the display read. Harry checked the others. Neville was 330, Ron 280, Jerry 190, Hermione 290. Ron barked, "Why is Ted so high? He's almost twice mine." Ted waved a hand. "Don't rely on that reading too much. It's a very superficial detection. Wizards can hide their magic. If you tested Dumbledore, the number might even come out lower than yours." Hermione examined the glasses and then looked at Ted. "Is there that much difference?" Neville asked, interested. "You can hide your magic?" "Yes, it's a skill, part of applying magic. If you conceal your magic, you don't stand out as much and you're harder to detect." Besides protection, aiming, and detection, the goggles had a night vision mode, which also drew on the wearer's magic. It wasn't perfect. Range and clarity were limited, but better than nothing in the dark. Hermione, intrigued by the blend of technology and magic, peered at the tiny etched symbols on the frame. "Are those runes? They're so small, I can barely make them out." Ted nodded. "I inherited some Ravenclaw material and have been teaching myself runes. I'm not an expert, but I've made some progress. The runes on these, combined with the silver magical conduits inside, let the goggles execute more precise internal patterns. I took inspiration from gnome devices." Hermione's eyes lit up. If runes could do all that, she wanted to learn them at once. The friends' conversation turned naturally to course selection for after the holidays, something they'd put off while dealing with the Bloody Baron's recent dramatic exit. They started picking classes with lively debate. "Ron, I don't think it's about the number of electives. Just pick a couple. Don't bite off more than you can chew." Neville scratched his head. "We should at least take care of magical creatures. Hagrid wrote saying he might be the professor next year." Jerry nodded and scribbled, "Care of magical creatures," down. "What about one more?" They needed a minimum of 2 electives, with no upper limit. Neville then timidly added, "I want Muggle studies. I'm curious about Muggle life, and I'd like to know what you learned before coming to Hogwarts. Also, I'll have to send my kids into Muggle society someday." Harry announced, "I want to take another divination class." Ron mumbled, "You still believe in divination?" "No, that's exactly why I want to, so I can see what tricks they're playing." Harry's tone was full of rebellious curiosity. Ron sighed. "Okay, then come with me. I don't care much, but I heard the divination owl's easier to pass. If we could drop one course, that'd be great." Jerry agreed. "Yes, drop one course," Ron grinned. "Then we can say goodbye to Snape." Hermione looked at Ted. "What about you?" Ted wrote on the paper. "Care of magical creatures, ancient runes, divination." "I won't take Muggle studies, nothing there for me. I'm a bit interested in arithmancy too, but it overlaps with divination and time's limited." "All right, I'll do the same," Hermione decided. Neville quickly added, "Then I'll take divination with you, everyone together." Ted had his reasons for being interested in divination. As a mind mage, he already had a level 1 divination ability, and he'd later gained a Taoist knowledge, red skill that involved divination. He hadn't fully tested it yet, but he understood the concepts and wanted to know whether he could be a diviner or even a prophet. That led to a detour about Professor Trelawney. Most students and many teachers thought her eccentric, claiming to read fate but often seeming inept, but in the original story she had been a hidden seer. In class, she once insisted that the child who grew up to be Harry had been born under Saturn's dominance, with black hair, a thin build, and orphaned in infancy, concluding he must be a winter baby when Harry was actually born in July. Yet the description matched Voldemort: black-haired, thin, orphaned, born in winter. When Harry later filled in planetary positions for his birth, he discovered 2 Neptunes, which hinted there might be more than one soul within him. Trelawney predicted an early death, and Lord Voldemort's soul fragment dies when Harry is 17. Her bad prophecies seemed to have an uncanny knack for coming true. The more people resisted, the faster the outcome arrived. There was the famous incident at the Christmas party when she refused to sit at Dumbledore's table because she claimed that when 13 dined together, the first to rise would be the first to die. Dumbledore stood to make room for her and later was the first of those at the table to die. Similar scenes played out. Sirius and 12 others ate together, and he was the first to rise, later the first among them to die. During the Seven Harrys deception, 13 people were at the Burrow. Lupin stood first, and later was the first of those 13 to die. Trelawney was a strange mix of unreliable behavior and terrifyingly accurate omens, a kind of half-immortal, as students joked. Ancient runes were entirely different, older and more complex than the contemporary magic system, fragmentary and unsystematic, making them difficult to learn. Hermione attacked the subject with fierce enthusiasm, constantly carrying an ancient runes dictionary thicker than a brick, studying symbol by symbol, reading several papers and articles at night. She debated meanings with Ted, trying to pin down the precise application of each rune. The core difficulty was that each symbol could mean many things. Many, yang, overflow, correct, and picking the meaning closest to the original intent required scholarship. A string of runes had to both make sense linguistically and align magically with the caster's intention to be effective. The field had become an old scholar's quarrel. Academics in their 70s and hundreds arguing in journals, tearing into each other's theories like feuding antiquarians. Ted, however, had inherited Ravenclaw materials and had done some practical work on the goggles, which gave him insights into rune application. He could teach Hermione the basics. He liked to emphasize that many kinds of knowledge were best learned through practice, just as the best way to learn a language was to live in it. That day, the group had just returned from the greenhouses, where Neville and his friends had been showing off their oversized puff shrooms and a mobile pea shooter. The puff shrooms were impressive, half a person tall and a meter across. Neville had cultivated an evolved strain that could distinguish friend from foe through its spores. If an enemy entered the alert range, it sprayed purple, bubble-like spores that eroded flesh, far more dangerous than the ordinary puff shrooms and scaredy shrooms. The mobile pea shooter was a proud achievement. Neville's team had grafted poisonous tendrils from a devil's snare into the plant so it could leave the soil and crawl around for a few hours. Neville could even let it wrap around his arm like a protective sleeve. Its peas weren't deadly. The magic projectiles were roughly like hurling a 3 or 4 centimeter stone with full force. They could cause serious head injuries, but killing someone was unlikely. Ted, ever ambitious, had tried to sign up for 5 electives and gone to Professor McGonagall about timetable conflicts. "No," McGonagall said firmly. "If the classes clash, you can't take them. Cut some." Ted blinked. "Huh? Professor, that's why I was hoping for a time turner. Professor, please give me your monthly votes?" He then muttered a thank you to "Changing the name is so expensive for the 100-point reward, half a joke, half a concession to Hogwarts bureaucracy." 164. Time turner and May knowledge, Professor McGonagall didn't bother to mince words. "No, Ted, there's no way around the timetable problem. You can only take 4 electives, and there can't be any time conflicts. Ted bristled inwardly. He had heard rumors, he'd expected resistance, but he tried anyway, putting on an obedient look. Professor, some of the older students told me there's a way to deal with time conflicts. McGonagall's eyes narrowed. She took off her glasses and fixed him with a stern look. Who told you that? Reluctantly, she explained. Time turners could, at best, send someone back a few hours. They were artifacts of ancient goblin magic, extremely rare, and in any case the Ministry had long since forbidden and destroyed most of them. There'd been a period after the first celestial conjunction when things went wrong. Time distortions, misbehaving time turners, dangerous anomalies. Once a witch mistakenly went back a century. When they finally retrieved her, she aged to death within days. Time itself seemed to buckle and shift. The safe limit was set to 5 hours, and eventually the Ministry destroyed almost every time turner left because the devices were becoming unreliable and catastrophic incidents followed their use. Ted listened, a little stunned. Part of him wanted to mutter that the story was wrong. The version he'd read somewhere else diverged here. But Professor McGonagall continued, and the tale that followed was stranger than most rumors. She told him about a wizard who returned from a time mission and found no one recognized him. The people and places he remembered had changed. His parents hadn't been together 30 years ago, and in that altered timeline, it was as though he had never existed. During an interrogation at the Ministry, he vanished in front of 5 Aurors. Later, 2 seers jointly issued a prophecy confirming that the man's account had been true, yet still he had disappeared, as if excised from the timeline. McGonagall reached out and patted Ted's head. Intelligence can make you bold, Ted, but it must be tempered with respect for magic. We're powerful, yes, but we are not omnipotent. Time has its own laws. Ted left her office feeling dazed. Having otherworld knowledge made him cocky sometimes. The reminder that even a well-informed wizard had limits was necessary. He mentally shrugged himself back into the common room bustle. "Why are you so out of it?" Hermione asked when he appeared at the table. "Sorry," Ted said. "I've just been thinking." "About?" "A line I like," he said. "Time isn't measured by how much you have, but by how you use it." Ron let out a theatrical groan, a chicken drumstick gripped in one hand. The younger students at the next table jumped. Somewhere a spoon clattered. Jerry began pounding his chest, cheese lodged in his throat. Before he could choke, Ted reacted. He delivered a sharp back blow that dislodged the cheese and saved him. Jerry coughed and grabbed Ron in the confusion. "What's wrong with you?" he demanded, eyes wide. "You nearly killed me." Neville glanced down at the vegetable soup splashed across his robes and nodded in sympathy. Ron put his leg of chicken down, looking miserable. "I can't do it," he mumbled. "I just can't." "Can't do what?" Harry asked. Neville, picking up a fragment of what had been discussed earlier, offered, "You mean the meditation?" Ron's shoulders sagged. Ted had taught a more reliable meditation routine, basically a gentle sequence of yoga, washing up, and then meditative breathing to fall asleep. Hermione had taken to it and now slept deeply. Her spells felt sharper, and she was brighter every morning. Most of the others had also improved. Ron, however, kept failing. He sniffed and said, "Last night I almost got in, then some weird noise woke me up. I was startled and realized it was my own snoring." Suppressing laughter, the friends tried to be kind. Ted put an arm around Ron. "Don't rush it. You've been under a lot of stress this year. Relax and let it happen. Trying too hard just creates a block." When he wasn't at meals or in class, Ted spent evenings in the Forbidden Forest 2 or 3 nights a week, clearing out dangerous creatures, gaining experience, and hoping for valuable components or cards. In a couple of weeks, he'd earned 2,000 experience points. Most of the loot he found was low-grade material, but one night he encountered something worth the risk. An acromantula had wandered from its territory, perhaps driven off by a mating or status dispute, and taken up a stealthy ambush in the trees. Acromantulas are classified XXXXX. Their danger rivals dragons and exceeds trolls, not because they're the hardest to injure, but because of their intelligence and tactics. They're enormous, not especially tough, and not particularly fast, but they are cunning. Some can even mimic speech. They build traps, camouflage themselves perfectly in forest foliage, and launch surprise attacks. They feed cruelly, binding prey, injecting venom, and draining the liquefied organs. They move in packs. Encountering one often means facing dozens. Their fine hairs can sense the slightest airflow, making disillusionment charms unreliable and ambushes deadly. Poachers rarely bother with them despite the value of their venom and eyes. The risk is too great. But Ted was not like most wizards. As a mind mage, he could sense the mental signatures of nearby creatures. Small insects produced little to no mental presence, but acromantulas registered strongly. He'd felt the spider from dozens of feet away and turned the ambush into a trap of his own. The fight was dangerous, but manageable. When it ended, he had claimed a 2-pint vial of venom, 8 preserved eyeballs, and several of the monster's large legs, ingredients he already imagined trying in a bizarre, high-protein dish. A ping of arcane feedback followed the harvest. Talent, otherworld knowledge, gold triggered. Discovered, bestiary of love and monsters, green. The bestiary recorded information on strange, mutated creatures in a peculiar apocalypse. It cost 200 experience to exchange. The name was odd, but it was a green quality knowledge item, far safer than the scarier red tier things Ted had once encountered. He decided to exchange for it. 200 experience points were consumed, and knowledge poured into Ted's mind. He read carefully. It was a world shaped by biochemical catastrophe. Humans had used nuclear missiles to shatter space rocks and paid an unexpected price. Radioactive fallout mixed with asteroid debris, and cold-blooded animals mutated into nightmarish beasts. Most of humanity had been wiped out. The survivors lived in underground shelters, clinging to life. The survivors had compiled a bestiary at great cost, cataloging the new monsters. On the face of it, the book felt almost useless. Its entries were bizarre. Toads the size of ponds, centipedes as thick as tree trunks. Ted thought of Hagrid and felt a flash of amusement. Wait, maybe the knowledge could still be useful. If bloodline modification of magical creatures existed, perhaps he could use these notes. If Neville and the others could cultivate the magical plants from Plants vs. Zombies, why couldn't Ted breed the monsters in this bestiary? He even had some Pokemon breeding techniques. Look at Ansu. He was doing very well. For now, though, Ted had a more immediate goal. He wanted to breed a chicken bro that could restrain a basilisk. Ted was certain he and his friends would have to face the basilisk eventually, just as they had faced Voldemort last year. It was better to be prepared. This year was different. It was more dangerous. The Chamber of Secrets had not been arranged by Dumbledore, so the headmaster could only intervene indirectly. Send Fawkes, send the Sorting Hat, try to make sure a savior wouldn't die of snake venom. But there were limits. If someone were stared to death, bitten to death, trampled, or swallowed by the basilisk, the phoenix couldn't bring them back. In a world like this, danger was unavoidable. Preparation mattered. Ted found a stretch of time to visit Hagrid. Hagrid was delighted to see him and shouted for him to stay for lunch. He was stewing chicken. Ted froze. I need a live rooster, he thought. A fighting rooster, a rooster that crowed loudly. Stew won't do. Hagrid, I'm here because I want a rooster, Ted said bluntly. A rooster? You here for my chickens too? Hagrid asked. Hagrid waved his hands and then explained. A few months into the school year, his flock had suffered a terrible fate. Whoever, or whatever, got them left no blood, but all their necks were broken. Hagrid and Fang had watched for days, but found nothing. He had bought chicks afterwards and raised them for months, and then just yesterday, the new flock had been killed again. This time, they'd been bitten. It looks like a snake. The marks look like snake bites, and Hagrid snapped angrily at a drumstick. Ted put down his fork. So this whole pot of chicken... Hagrid nodded happily. Ted cut him off. I'm full. You eat slowly. I'm going back. Remember to find me the fiercest chicken. He left in a hurry, and a little distance away fumbled through his small bag. Where's the antidote? I always carry it. After downing several bottles of potion, Ted finally felt safer. He didn't know what had killed those hens. Could have been venomous. Hagrid might be fine eating stew. Ted didn't want to risk it. He imagined dying from poisoned chicken more than from the basilisk. Better safe than sorry. Hagrid was efficient. Within 2 days, he produced a rooster. How big was it? When it raised its head, it came up to Jerry's belly button. Bought it through a black market trader, Hagrid crowed. Isn't it splendid, mighty and domineering? Impressive, Ted said, trying not to laugh. Jerry, meanwhile, kept a safe distance. In the days that followed, Ted kept the rooster, dubbed Chicken Bro, in the abandoned classroom and set about a modification plan. A rooster's crow could be fatal to a basilisk, but Ted refused to rely on books alone. In that abandoned room, there were magical white mice, long-tailed thieving monkeys that had just regrown fur after being shaved, Chicken Bro, and Ansu often dropped by. It felt like a menagerie. Soon it was May 9th, and a Quidditch match was scheduled, Gryffindor versus Hufflepuff. The students needed something normal to hold on to. After all the incidents this year, they were tense and anxious. The match promised to be a release, but they never reached the pitch. Professor McGonagall's voice rang down from above. All students returned to their common rooms. The match is canceled. Head boy and head girl and the student council president, organize your houses immediately. Her tone was sharp and urgent. Younger students were confused. Older ones, their faces went pale. When Ted and the others returned to the castle, people had gathered near the staircase leading to the dungeons. Harry had already dashed ahead to see what was happening. As they approached, they heard crying. Ron went white. "Peggy," he blurted, yanking the student in front of him aside. Around 20 people crowded around a small group. Even Professor Flitwick was there. In the center, Peggy Weasley was kneeling and sobbing. In front of her was a student like a statue. Someone else had been petrified. Hermione pressed a hand to her mouth. "It's Penelope." Ted pushed past Peggy's shoulders and saw the victim's face. Penelope Clearwater, Ravenclaw's head girl, frozen and expressionless. He quickly noted why she wasn't dead. She must have looked at the basilisk only indirectly, seeing its gaze reflected in a highly polished suit of armor. Still, the situation was worse than that. On the third-floor corridor, another student had been petrified, Pansy Parkinson, a second-year Slytherin. 2 students attacked in such quick succession. The match was canceled, and all students were confined to their common rooms. Head boy and head girl were instructed to guard the doors. The school community, already frayed by earlier victims, now felt nerves snap. One of the petrified was a pure-blood Slytherin. Rumors and fear ran wild. Owls flew from the school to every corner of Britain. The deans and professors gathered in the headmaster's office with grim faces. In fact, when Justin Finch Fletchley and one of the ghosts had been targeted earlier, the deans had quietly scoured the school. They found nothing, just like 50 years ago. They had been on alert, but Lavender Brown had still been petrified. Now the attacks were happening 2 in a day. It could no longer be kept quiet. That evening, the Owls returned with a Daily Prophet special edition, full-page coverage of the events, the Chamber of Secrets, monsters, petrified students, and ghosts. Reporter Rita Skeeter ran a vicious column attacking Dumbledore, suggesting the venerable headmaster was too old and overburdened to run the school. Ted and his friends were livid at the dinner table. Neville trembled. How dare she mock Dumbledore? Harry snapped the paper shut. What filth! A garbage reporter. Ron turned pale with fury. Jerry nearly couldn't eat. Hermione scowled. A reporter should be objective. How can she say that? Ted tried to calm them. Don't be angry. These talking heads are always controlled by someone. If she's pointedly attacking the principal, she's probably been prompted. What do you mean? Harry asked. Perhaps someone wanted her to say that, Ted said. Dumbledore's under pressure. The Quidditch calamity released pent-up fear. Students flooded their families with letters asking to go home. The deans, unable to ignore the crisis, ordered a full, systematic search of the castle, carpeted and thorough. Ted's abandoned classroom was included. He'd already moved the animals into the room of requirement, so there was nothing to find, but the search took a whole day and turned up nothing. Under the circumstances, students kept applying for leave. In less than 2 weeks, nearly a quarter of the student body left. If the exodus continued, the school might have to suspend classes. 50 years earlier, the school had nearly been forced to close, and Hagrid had been pushed out as a scapegoat. The memory of that made everyone uneasy. 166. Brother Chicken, evolve quickly. Ted, this is serious. You can't go alone this time. Hermione huffed, cheeks puffed. Ted had been planning to slip off to an abandoned classroom to continue his experiments, and time was tight. But Hermione refused to let him go by himself. Students still at the school had strict orders not to act alone. Even trips to the lavatory were done in groups. The castle was full of nervous people. Many had joined the dueling club, hoping to learn a few defensive spells. Unfortunately for Lockhart, the club had been taken over by Professor Flitwick, leaving him sidelined. He'd even begged Dumbledore for leave with an embarrassingly flimsy excuse, and Dumbledore had replied, if people knew a professor left the school and the students at such a time, he would be ruined. That single sentence had cut Lockhart off. Hermione was equally adamant about Ted. Wherever you're going, I'm coming with you. What if I'm going to the loo? Ted grinned, earning a sharp cuff from Hermione. He relented and took her to the room of requirement. It was time to let her in on his research. She would make a good assistant. They donned anti-death goggles, with Ansu scouting ahead. The three of them looked like a pair of futuristic warriors. The castle was quieter than usual because of the Chamber of Secrets. Everyone was staying in their common rooms or moving in groups under the head boy and girl, as if facing a real army. When Ted and Hermione entered the room of requirement, Hermione's eyes widened. She had been there before, but hadn't noticed much. She'd been too impressed. The room was different this time. Where she'd previously found a cozy dating nook with a round table, green plants, and cakes, this time the same door opened onto a vast, simply furnished space dominated by bookshelves and storage racks. A curved, solid wood experimental table over 3 meters long sat in the center. Nearby, an iron cage held a long-tailed thief monkey with patchy fur. Another small cage contained a white hamster that had clearly enjoyed its rations, and a proud, strutting rooster, Chicken Bro, chased a squeaking Jerry almost into a hole. "Is this your lab?" Hermione asked, startled. It reminded her a little of her father's dental office, only magnified and with a sterile operating room edge. Ted summoned a chair with a flick of his wand. "Sit. There are a few books on ancient runes you can look through. I need to continue my work." "Chicken Bro, come here," Ted cooed. The rooster strutted over, shook its wings, and hopped onto the table. Ted pointed his wand at its feathers and muttered an altered transference spell. A faint glow tracked his wand. The spell came from notes left by Professor Quirrell for analyzing bloodlines and adaptability of living organisms. Quirrell had been a tragic figure. He'd fallen in with Voldemort, but his knowledge of magical bloodlines had been deep and systematic, the result of painstaking work. Much of the trail that led him to Voldemort, however, had been seeded by Voldemort himself. On the table, a huge notebook lay open, and a magic quill automatically wrote with uncanny speed. Ted had modified the quill with a grain-sized white crystal. It sensed his thoughts and transcribed them far faster than handwriting or dictation. Ted had 2 modification plans for Chicken Bro and was running the final screening. First, he needed to beef up its body. Chicken Bro was already a fighter among roosters, capable of taking on 2 Jerrys in close combat, but wholly inadequate against a basilisk. Ted didn't expect it to outright fight a basilisk. The goal was having it run or take short flights so it wouldn't be ground into paste by a lash of tail. That meant grafting in other powerful magical bloodlines to boost strength and some short-range hovering. Second was magical resistance. Every magical creature has varying resistance. The aim was to raise Chicken Bros as high as possible. Clearly, its ancestors had been bred in the wizarding world for generations, which helped. Finally, and most importantly, the crow. A basilisk is hatched from a rooster's egg by a toad, and a rooster's crow is naturally harmful to it. But for a 1,000-year-old basilisk, a single chicken's crow would at best hurt or severely disorient it. To truly fell such a monster might require a chorus of hundreds of chickens for several minutes. Ted wanted to amplify Chicken Bro's crow, and ideally pair it with a megaphone or other device to maximize the effect. He listed materials aloud as he worked. Griffin tail feather strengthens body and hovering ability. 1 feather, 22 galleons. Chicken Bro, you have to be strong. A handful of great monster bird scales and a beak fragment for magic and physical resistance. Where did Hagrid get this stuff? A Horklump's tongue, perfect for strengthening the crow. Mr. Giggs has quite the connections. On the floor, a 2-meter diameter magic circle glowed into being. 3 materials and 3 rune-inscribed points formed a hexagram. "Stand there and don't move," Ted said. "I'll keep you safe." Hermione rolled her eyes as Chicken Bro was bound like some ceremonially wrapped mummy. Its eyelids barely twitched. She found herself watching Ted rather than the runes in her book. "This plan is the most cost-effective right now," Ted muttered as he charged the circle. He was not scrupulously avoiding using school magic out of principle. He mostly didn't want Dumbledore to notice. The spell's power would come from him and the items he'd prepared. It wasn't nearly as grand as Ansu's evolution into a dark magic crow. This was a smaller modification. Ted's recovery was fast, bolstered by a lucky coin and potions. Each of the 6 points needed to be energized in 3 stages. When all 6 blazed blue, the ritual would be complete. Ted took out his mysterious dance flute green, looked at Chicken Bro in the circle, and grinned. So, evolution begins. As his wand swung, energy flowed from the 6 points along a trail of silver powder. The circle lit up and pulsed. Hermione, witnessing the spectacle for the first time, gaped. Ted put the mysterious dance flute to his lips and started to play, the Digimon evolution song. The music intensified the reaction. He let the bone flute drop, but it continued to play on its own. Ted raised a hand and a homemade karaoke setup in the corner burst into life. He started to sing, "Everyone can run away or give up. In a single moment, but keep walking on. There are things only you can do on this blue world, so the light won't go out. Seize it. The dream you pictured. Protect your precious friends. You can become a stronger you." The lab filled with glaring light and spinning, multicolored beams. Ted shot a look at Chicken Bro. "Set the mood," he seemed to ask. Chicken Bro wanted to scream, "Stop singing! And can't you just make me evolve?" Hermione felt herself oddly dizzy from the spectacle. She pictured, absurdly, a little cat girl super evolving. When the light faded, a new Chicken Bro stood where the old one had been, and Ted could meet its gaze without ducking. Its feathers gleamed like burnished metal. Its beak was enlarged and golden. Its eyes were hard and resolute, claws gouging the stone slab. Its comb was blood red, and it even sported a tuft of feathers parted in the middle, an aggressively fashionable rooster. When it crowed, the sound carried a magical weight that made the hair on Hermione's arms rise. Then the great bird leapt, wings spanning over 3 meters, and pounced on Ted like a mother hen snatching a chick. Ted did not flinch. He lifted a finger. The magically coated creature, middle part Chicken Bro, as the quill recorded, stiffened midair and dropped flat to the floor. Of course, he'd prepared a fail-safe. Professor Quirrell had always kept layers of contingency for his experiments. Ted was only being prudent. Ansu cackled at the humbled rooster. The modification seemed a success. The rest would be training. Hermione felt like her face was stuck in surprised mode. She blurted, "You also know Japanese?" "That was Japanese, right?" Ted shrugged. "When you have nothing else to do, learning a foreign language is useful." Hermione glared. "He even had time to learn a foreign language?" She pointed at Chicken Bro being teased in the corner. "Can it understand Japanese?" Ted smiled. "Hermione, you're missing the point. It doesn't matter if it understands. The key is whether I understand." He looked at his masterpiece with the pride of a mad scientist. Compared to Ansu's evolution, this ceremony had been oddly fitting. Ted let himself bask in smugness and absurd inspiration. "I came up with a peculiar ritual, Digimon style. Genius. Do you know why Agumon always evolves first? To show that courage comes first. Do you know why Patamons last? Because even when friendship, honesty, love, knowledge, innocence, and light have been trampled by reality, you must keep hope. And why Tai's crest is courage? Because when love is traded for friendship and light for hope, without courage you can't go on." Ted paused. "Wait, no, that's not right. I think I was supposed to be quoting Pokemon trainer tips, not Digimon. Whatever. If it works, who cares?" 167. Headmaster suspended. Hagrid arrested. That night, Ted and Hermione didn't return to their dormitory until well after midnight, primarily because Ted felt pressed for time and had a lot to finish, not for any other reason. Besides completing the Chicken Bro evolution ritual, he finally finished the magical tooth dagger he had wanted to make for so long. He had salvaged a fanged dragon tusk from Hagrid's collection, 20 centimeters of bone. The blade was polished from the tusk. The handle was wrapped with a rope braided from guardian tree bark mixed with unicorn tail hair. Ted carved 2 runes into it, magic and tooth. Then he modified it with alchemy, binding evil protection and a flash burst to the blade using powder ground from guardian wood and silver sickles. The dagger would be powerful, but it wouldn't last. In at most 3 months, it would be completely destroyed. Using the flash burst would wear it down even faster. Ted's alchemy still wasn't precise enough to consolidate all those effects into a durable whole. If this were some other world, the weapon would be labeled ethereal and be irreparable. It was a pity, but he needed the extra edge now. Fortunately, the main material had come from Hagrid, otherwise that tusk alone would have cost 50 galleons, and he could never have afforded it. Of course, he couldn't constantly take Hagrid's things for himself, so he'd made something for the giant in return. The next morning, Padma Patil, Hermione's roommate and the younger of the Patil twins, found Hermione already up and organizing her books. "Hermione? Oh my, up so early. When did you get back last night?" Night excursions were hard to hide from roommates. Hermione smiled. "Didn't I teach you yoga? You should practice more. Helps boost your energy." Padma flopped onto her bed in mock despair. She was Indian, and here she was being lectured on yoga by Hermione Granger. "I'm going to the common room first." "Go on, go find Ted," Hermione teased. Only 2 or 3 people were in the common room. Since head girl Penelope Clearwater had been petrified, the only remaining head boy had taken to waiting for the students each morning in the common room. 5 students had been harmed so far this year, 2 of them Ravenclaws, which put the Ravenclaw crowd on edge. Some whispered that the so-called heir might be targeting Ravenclaw. After breakfast, Ted handed the tooth dagger to Neville. "What's this?" Neville asked, puzzled. The others looked baffled too. Hermione had assumed Ted had made it for himself. Ted met their looks. "Friends, a lot of terrible things have happened this year. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened again, like 50 years ago. 5 students have been attacked, and the end of term is coming. I'm worried something will happen during the final exams. We must prepare," he went on. "Remember last year, when we got past the professor's challenges and faced you-know-who? We should be ready to fight. Otherwise, the school might have to close." "Neville, a battle?" Neville whispered. "With whom?" Ted shook his head. "I don't know. Maybe the heir. Maybe that monster in the chamber itself." A shiver ran through Jerry. Ron's face went pale. Harry clenched his fists, brow furrowed. He and Lavender weren't on the best of terms, but he still wanted that heir found and punished. Neville's jaw set. "I'm honored to be at this school with you all. I couldn't go back to who I was before. I won't. I want to defend Hogwarts. I'll fight for it, whoever the enemy is." Ted smiled, genuinely happy. Neville's growth was plain: courage, resolve. Ted felt certain Neville would keep growing until he could stand against the dark. "Friends, let's write our own story," he thought. After dinner, the 6 of them slipped away from the main group and out of the castle. Ted had made Hagrid something and wanted to give it to him. Neville also said he'd learned something from the diary he'd found, a glimpse of events from 50 years ago. Although Hagrid had been cleared, he couldn't have been the heir or released the monster. He might still be a vital witness. 5 minutes after they left, a different group arrived at the castle. Well-dressed, self-important men. Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic, in a wide-brimmed hat, led 2 ministry officials. Beside them stood an old acquaintance of Ted's, Lucius Malfoy. They visited the headmaster's office, then left and walked toward Hagrid's hut. Ted and the others had just arrived at Hagrid's when Hagrid poured them tea. "Why'd you lot out so late?" "I told ya. Things are tense. I won't have ye going into the Forbidden Forest. Best get back." Neville hesitated, then whispered, "Hagrid, we wanted to ask you about the Chamber of Secrets from 50 years ago." Hagrid's expression froze, then slid into fright. "No, it weren't me. I didn't. Don't talk rubbish." "We know it wasn't you," Ted said quickly. "We and Professor Dumbledore both trust you." Hermione added, "We just want to know what happened back then." Hagrid's anger flared again as the memory returned. All right. A girl died in the 3rd floor loo. They said I kept a monster and sent me away, broke my wand. He stared at the ceiling, still indignant after 50 years. "Aragog never hurt anyone," Hagrid muttered when Ron asked cautiously what creature he'd kept. "What is Aragog?" Hermione asked, but Hagrid covered his face and begged her not to ask. Those memories still hurt him. Ted waved his hand. "We didn't come to bring trouble. We brought a gift." "A gift?" Hagrid blinked. Christmas was long gone. "What is it?" Ted produced a thick 3-strand braid. Remember the unicorn tail hair and guardian tree bark you gave me? I braided them with some of your hair and finished it with a small bell of alchemically hardened bronze that no longer rings. On someone Hagrid's size, it would be a bracelet. On the others, it would be more like a necklace. Hagrid took it and turned it over in his huge fingers. It looks lovely, he said, forgetting his earlier distress. It's not just decorative, Ted said. What does it do? That requires the password. Wait. Ansu, watching from above, had spotted people below casting Lumos. Ted saw them too. Wait, what? Hermione whispered. Ansu's seen people. Dumbledore? Professor Dumbledore? Neville and Jerry were surprised. Would he be here to catch us? Harry, still feeling the effects of their night out, did not relax. Ted shook his head. Not to get us. He's not alone. Fudge is with him, and Lucius Malfoy. Fudge? Ron spat. The minister? What an idiot. He sneered. Fudge's harshness toward half-humans had angered many. Hagrid's sympathizers were especially furious. Hide. Don't let Dumbledore see you've snuck out, Hagrid said, more nervous than anyone. Harry flung the invisibility cloak over Neville and Jerry, while Ted cast an invisibility spell over himself and Hermione. The 6 of them melted into the shadows inside the hut. Hagrid peered out the window, and after 10 seconds, a light moved across the yard. Someone knocked on the door. Hagrid, open up. It was Dumbledore's voice. Come in, come in. Hagrid hurried to the door. Outside stood Dumbledore, Cornelius Fudge, and Lucius Malfoy. Rubus Hagrid, Fudge said with false cordiality, I'm sorry, but you'll have to come with us. Where? Hagrid's voice cracked. Azkaban. Fudge tried to sound reasonable. In Hagrid's eyes, the minister's face was hateful. No. Why? I didn't do nothing. Dumbledore, you know that. Hagrid shouted, his face pale. Fudge tried to soothe him. It's only temporary, Hagrid. Once the real culprit is caught, you'll be released and will apologize. Dumbledore spoke quietly. Cornelius, taking Hagrid won't help in the present situation. I must do something, Albus, Fudge insisted. It's the ministry's duty. You've seen the arrest warrant, haven't you? Dumbledore had no reply. Lucius stepped forward with a calm, practiced air. His smile was careful but smug. You will find the signatures of the board on this document, he said. Given the current situation and the headmaster's alleged failure to carry out his duties, the board has unanimously decided to temporarily relieve Professor Dumbledore of his post. Temporarily, of course. Lucius's satisfaction was plain. Dumbledore examined the order with the same calm he always showed, then looked at Lucius and asked quietly, You intimidated them, didn't you, Lucius? Of course not, Lucius replied, but the triumph on his face said otherwise. Inside the hut, the 6 watched in stunned silence. The wizarding world, it seemed, was moving to lock Hagrid away and to remove the headmaster from his post. Both supposedly temporary, both devastating blows to those who cared for Hogwarts. No, you can't. Get out! Get out of my house! Hagrid roared, angrier than he had been the night they tried to take him to Azkaban. Lucius Malfoy lifted his chin just enough to sneer. Of course we can. And this, well, let's call it a house. I don't intend to stay another minute. Hagrid ground his teeth. If you drive Dumbledore away, the school will be bathed in blood. That's not our concern. You'd better prepare for Azkaban, Lucius said lightly. Ted watched Hagrid's face and wondered whether the old man had known all along that the diary could open the Chamber of Secrets. If Hagrid had known it was a Horcrux of Lord Voldemort, he wouldn't have looked so calm. What would his expression have been then? Hagrid, with no other choice, turned to Dumbledore. Albus, you can't go. You can't leave. Dumbledore's eyes were steady. Hagrid, don't be frightened. I will obey the orders of the Board of Governors, but the headmaster of Hogwarts isn't dismissed that way, unless no one in the school needs me anymore. As long as someone here needs help, they shall have it. His gaze swept the wall where Ted and the others were trying to remain invisible. For a wizard of Dumbledore's stature, it was impossible not to notice someone hiding so close. The last sentence was clearly meant for them. Hagrid was led away with Dumbledore following. Before they left, Ted shoved a message into Hagrid's mind. The bracelet, its password is Hear Me Roar. Don't forget, Hear Me Roar. Hagrid paused, pulled on the bearskin coat Ted had given him, moved to the door, and as he left shouted, If anyone's looking for answers, follow the spiders. Fudge and the others stared, baffled, as if Hagrid had gone mad. Hagrid muttered only, I hope someone can look after Fang for me." When the six gathered back at the round table, Hagrid, who had been having tea with them moments before, was gone. Ted settled Fang's whimpering head on his knee. Jerry's face was grim. "He was framed? Hagrid's innocent," Ted nodded. "Yes. Unfortunately, the ones who framed him at the Ministry know that better than we do." Neville looked bewildered. "But why? Why would they do this?" Ted answered without heat. "They don't care who the culprit is. They needed a scapegoat the public would accept. Those who set Hagrid up know just how wrongly he's been treated." Hermione's face twisted in disgust. "How vile. And I used to want to work at the Ministry." Ron mumbled with his head down. "So what do we do now?" Jerry shot to his feet. "Hagrid said, 'Spiders, follow the spiders,'" Hermione added between tears. "He also told us to look after Fang. When will he be back?" Her voice broke. Ted stroked her hair. "Don't cry. Don't worry. Hagrid will be all right." Even Harry found it hard to be optimistic. Dumbledore had been driven out. After a short, anxious council, the six decided to follow the spiders. Sure enough, a scatter of small spiders was crawling frantically out of Hagrid's windowsill. Jerry murmured, "I feel like I've seen this before." While rummaging through Hagrid's hut for anything useful, Ted urged them to hurry. "Remember in the winter, a group of spiders left the castle and ran off into the frozen waste." Fang led the way as the six, wands raised to give them light, followed the little spiders into the forbidden forest. After about 10 minutes, Ted was certain they had entered Acromantula territory. He resented Hagrid a little in his head. Hagrid always assumed what wasn't dangerous to him mustn't be dangerous to others. He had never learned to see things from someone else's point of view. These Acromantula were man-eating, and because Hagrid years ago had provided a mate for his pet and shown them favor, their numbers and territory had exploded. They practically ruled this part of the forest. If any of the others had stumbled into their colony without a plan, they'd be dragged straight into a spider's belly. Ted halted them. "Friends, be prepared for a fight." "Huh? What do you mean?" Hermione asked. "What sort of things live in the forest with Hagrid's pets?" At Ted's reminder, everyone suddenly went on guard. From dragons to Cerberus, Hagrid's taste in creatures was strange to say the least. Ted said, "I've been here before." Hermione's eyes sharpened. "You promised you wouldn't enter the forest without permission, and if anything happened, you'd take me with you." Ted flushed and tried to smooth it over. "Don't be angry. I needed a few things from the forest for experiments. I only slept a little there. You know, worried your lack of sleep would mess up your classes." Hermione made a small, disgruntled noise and mentally noted the grudge for later. Harry pressed, "So what's here then?" Ted answered, "I know what Hagrid raised back then." Jerry leaned forward. "What is it?" "Acromantula." "Acromanta, what?" "A lot of them. Giant spiders, highly dangerous, intelligent, even able to speak. And they eat people." At the word spider, Ron shuddered. Every hair on his body prickled. He spluttered. "He nearly sent me into a nest of spiders. When I see Hagrid again, I'm going to punch him. Honest I am." Neville massaged his temples. "So, do we keep going or not?" The little spiders ahead were already almost out of sight. If they didn't follow, they'd lose any trail. Ted said, "Keep moving, but be ready to pull back." Harry brightened. "I have a plan." The others immediately leaned in. "Tell us!" Ted opened his mouth. Harry beat him to it. "I have a plan. Will you listen?" There was a brief, chaotic bargaining about whose plan to follow until, with no time left for squabbling, they pushed on for another 20 minutes. They moved deeper into the forest. The trees grew gaunt and skeletal, trunks black, crowns bare. Pale sheets of web clung to and drifted from the branches. Ron's knees went weak every time he saw a web. He could picture the 8 twitching legs and felt his own legs ready to bolt. Then the ground opened into a huge pit, a great, abandoned shaft like a collapsed quarry, its far side gaping inward. Something rustled in its depths, trying to climb out of the underground cavern. By the dim moonlight, the six made out a spider far larger than a jeep. Its body was bristling with black hairs like steel needles. Each of its 8 legs was thicker than an ordinary man's thigh. On its head were 8 eyes, but each eye was clouded with a white film. Ted's mind pinged with recognition. This was far larger than the Acromantula he had once killed. A glance, a kind of automatic check, brought up a single line of information, almost like a sign hovering in his thoughts. Aragog, Acromantula, magical creature. Level 13, 95. Perhaps its level had dropped with old age and blindness. The spider seemed to sense outsiders and began to pull itself from the pit as if the tiny spiders had brought news. Before Ted could think further, the thing spoke. Its voice was a rustling whisper like leaves on metal. "Is that Hagrid?" When there was no answer, it sniffed the air. "No, the scent is wrong. Who are you?" Harry found his courage and called out, "We're Hagrid's friends. He sent us to you to ask about what happened at the castle 50 years ago." "Hagrid's friend? What happened 50 years ago?" The acromantula clicked its mandibles and smacked its mouth. It was surprisingly loquacious. It didn't refuse to speak so much as ramble, which made Harry, Hermione, and the others breathe more easily. The spider said its name was Aragog. It had been given to Hagrid as an egg by a traveler. Hagrid had hatched it inside the castle, feeding it breadcrumbs and leftover food. But soon after, something terrible had happened in the castle. A girl had been murdered in the washroom, and people came to seize Hagrid and Aragog. Hagrid had let Aragog go, and the spider had eventually settled in the Forbidden Forest. After that, Aragog didn't know. Hermione pressed on. "What exactly is the monster in the Chamber of Secrets?" Aragog rubbed its front legs and seemed uneasy. "I cannot say. It is the spider's natural enemy. I cannot face it." The spider made plain it did not want to speak of the creature. It did, however, brag that Hagrid had taken good care of it all those years, had even found it a mate and sired a great many children. A great many children? Ron's eyes widened. He looked up into the moonlight and froze. Dozens of spiders, each as large as a pony, were descending silently from the trees on silk threads. A high, dolphin-like shriek escaped him. Only then did the others realize they had unwittingly been surrounded by acromantulas. "We are Hagrid's friends," Hermione cried, stepping forward. "You can't." Aragog clicked its mandibles again. The smaller spiders stopped their advance, but some of the larger ones pressed forward, their chelicerae clacking like teeth. They were communicating. They had been tricked. "We will not harm Hagrid," Aragog said, "but others may not be so lucky." It twisted and looked around. "I cannot stop my children from enjoying fresh meat delivered to their doorstep." "Understand that, indeed," Jerry spat, and threw out several round, date-sized objects, one of the Weasley twins' inventions. They hadn't quite mastered transfigured candy yet, but their crackle firecrackers packed a punch. The things detonated with bracing bangs and flashes. The acromantulas had never seen anything like it. The sparks and noise sent them stumbling back, opening a cleared space. "According to plan, retreat," Ted ordered, and Ted's foot stamped. A cold, white current fanned outward in a blast of frost. Weeds and bushes iced over in an instant. 3 or 4 of the closer, hungrier acromantulas had their legs frozen solid. Ted jabbed his wand again and the ice exploded, shards spraying like splinters. "Retreat! Retreat!" Ron took off ahead, surprisingly fast, firing one repelling jinx after another to blast the spiders out of his path. The others stared. Ron's hand-me-down wand had seen better days, and it was a small miracle it hadn't backfired on him. He had forgotten that and felt invincible for a moment. Spiders weren't so scary. He was a wizard after all, but there were too many. Spiders crowded front, back, left, and right, and some still dangled overhead. They ran until more spiders blocked their way. "Prepare! Evil protection!" Ted barked. Wands raised, a surge of magic pooled and bloomed into a strange field around the 6 of them, a 20-meter radius of shimmering force. Any spider that stepped in felt a searing discomfort and slithered away, hissing. But outside that ring, the forest teemed, a huge mass of spiders gathered in layers. Ted caught Neville's eye. Neville nodded and pushed to the front. With the nearest spider only a few meters away, he drew a dagger that looked oddly fang-like. "Flashbang!" he cried. There was a deafening bang, and for an instant the world went white. Acromantulas fear the basilisk because its gaze kills, and acromantulas, with their 8 immovable eyes, cannot look away. The flash was the same in effect. 99% of the spiders were blinded, their clicking and scuttling turning to frantic chaos as they stumbled and attacked one another in panic. A car horn sounded in the distance. 2 beams of headlights cut through the trees, and an old, scratched Ford careened out of the woods. Ron's face lit up. "It's my family's car." "Get in! Move!" Ted shouted. Everyone piled into the car. You go on ahead and wait for me up there, Ted told them through the open door. I'm going to give them a proper beating. He slammed the door, turned, and faced the snippets of spider horde that hadn't yet recovered. He raised his wand, and the air hummed. Wall of fire! A ring of flame rose 2 meters high around him. A few of the larger acromantulas recovered first. They clustered around the fire, unwilling to approach, but equally unwilling to retreat. They chattered in fractured phrases. Eat him. Hang him, inject venom. I want to start from the feet. They were Aragog's offspring, older and fiercer. Ted noticed Aragog itself lingering at the cave's mouth. Most of its body receded into shadow as it observed. Did Aragog expect Ted to thin the brood? Whatever the reason, Ted didn't hesitate. He pointed his wand at the ground under the pressing mass of spiders. Flame storm. The earth became red hot, then erupted. Fire leapt up like molten iron, a column 5 meters high, and a furnace of heat spreading several meters beyond. The dark of the forbidden forest lit up in a violent orange glow. The roar of burning filled the trees, and then after a few seconds, ebbed away, leaving only charred husks and ash. The surviving acromantulas fled. Inside Ted's head, a cascade of system-like notifications chimed in rapid succession, dings counting kills and experience points. Killed acromantula, gained 730 XP, 690, 720, a dozen, 20 dings in an instant. The total added up to 12,960 experience points. Ted felt a surge of exhilaration. The payoff of a well-placed spell was plain to see. He also felt regret. The bodies and venom, the valuable materials, had all been burned away. He scooped up 7 or 8 white and green cards from the scorched ground, then cast greased souls and sprinted back. Let the trees and spiders learn the consequences of their choices, he thought as he ran. He returned safely. The others were shaken, but relieved. Ron, who had gripped the steering wheel of his family's flying Ford with a kind of reverence, stomped the accelerator and shifted gears so fast his hand blurred. The car could no longer truly fly, but it could still jump and glide short distances. Ron drove through the tangled, uneven terrain of the forbidden forest like a madman on a mountain pass. Jerry's face was pressed comically flat against the windshield as he begged, muffled, "Ron, I know you're in a hurry to get away from the spiders, but maybe, slow down. Don't let us die by your hand." Ron ignored him, finally bursting out of the forest and bringing the car to a shuddering stop. 6 people sprawled and panted inside. The old car groaned as if it might die. Ron suddenly buried his face on the steering wheel and began to sob. His friends were bewildered. Jerry tried to comfort him. "You drove pretty well, Ron," Harry offered weakly. "Look, your family's car is back. Congratulations." "Congratulations," Neville echoed. Ron only cried harder, choking and sobbing. "It's me. It's all because of me. I should have been braver and told everyone earlier." "Did your kid bring the monster here?" Jerry shouted again. "What are you?" he added, glaring at Ron. Ron sat at the wheel, crying, snot and tears making it hard to see. He grinned through his sobs, a miserable, broken little smile, and then he said it, voice ragged. "I'm the heir of the Chamber of Secrets. I opened the Chamber of Secrets. I'm sorry. Ah!" For a long second, the others looked as if someone had just cast Petrificus Totalis on them. They stared at one another, speechless. Harry kept winking at the others as if to say, "Is Ron really terrified of spiders? I knew we shouldn't have let him come. He looks like he's talking nonsense. Should I knock him out so he sleeps it off?" Jerry, still furious, muttered something about poor judgment. Neville was even more incredulous. Slytherin heir? Open the Chamber of Secrets? Impossible. Absolutely impossible. I'm a Parselmouth and I haven't said a thing. Why would you take the blame? Hermione, practical as ever, hissed, "Ted, give Ron a stupefy and then take him to a healer." Ted only stared, unable to believe what he was hearing. Ron had the worst luck. Crying so hard he could barely breathe, he clung to the steering wheel and rocked. No one went up to comfort him. Everyone was still dazed. After a long time, he ran out of tears and began, in fits and starts, to tell them what had happened. He started at the end of last summer, at the bookstore. The day Diagon Alley had been in the papers over a monster disturbance. He remembered that. He remembered Arthur Weasley and Lucius Malfoy showing the children a demonstration of how wizards could fight. Ginny had found an extra second-hand notebook the day after that. Ron had needed a notebook, and though it was old and second-hand, it was blank and usable, so he took it. At first, nothing happened. Ron wrote the sort of thing he always did, things like what he had for breakfast, a few miserable sentences at most. But once he got to school, things changed. The night he drove the flying car into the Homping Willow and got a howler from his mother, he wrote a lot in that book, all the shame, frustration, and regret. The next day, the book's entries changed. The speaker, or rather the voice in the book, wrote back with kind, comforting words. At the time, Ron didn't think much of it. He wrote more, and the book wrote back, gradually drawing him in. Ted later said the diary had been lying dormant, biding its time until it found someone with a weakness. Then its influence began to eat away at Ron. The voice called itself Tom Riddle. He was knowledgeable, clever, and impossibly understanding. He spoke so nicely that Ron liked him almost at once. Ron confessed he had told Tom many things: friendship problems, magic questions, petty jealousies. He admitted, red-faced, that he had been jealous of Ted, jealous of how admired Ted was, of every highlight, jealous of his knack for succeeding. He even punched himself twice, quick and hard, as if to punish himself for admitting it. Ted and the others grabbed his wrists to stop him. They urged him to go on. Tom Riddle, through the diary, was manipulative. He told Ron to get along with his friends. That advice lowered Ron's guard and then twisted his mind further. Slowly, Ron grew distant, stopped confiding in the others, and started to fall into a sicker, listless state. Jerry said he had noticed Ron acting weak then and thought it was just because Ron skipped morning exercise. But Ron's grades suddenly shot up. He stopped having to copy homework and even earned extra marks in class. The imperceptible change made him more and more dependent on Tom's counsel. What finally broke Ron was finding his mother's letter among Lockhart's fan mail she had written to Gilderoy Lockhart. He felt stupid and ashamed. Then the Chamber of Secrets opened. Filch's cat, Mrs. Norris, was found petrified, hanging upside down. That Halloween, Ron had planned to dress as a giant chicken leg with Jerry. He had forgotten the diary at the burrow and gone back for it. The period he couldn't account for was short, but he suspected that during that time he might have opened the chamber. Later, he found red dye under his fingernails and couldn't remember touching any red dye. He had blackouts, waking up in strange places, once early outside the castle covered in feathers, convinced he'd sleepwalked. Once his old owl bumped into him at breakfast, and the trouble was deflected, but the pattern kept repeating. After Christmas, Ron's fear grew. He wasn't a new student like Ginny. He'd been through a lot with Ted and the others, and knew when things didn't add up. Losing chunks of time, waking up somewhere weird, then someone getting hurt. He couldn't see it as coincidence anymore. So, after New Year, driven by fear, he threw the diary away. He hoped that if the diary was gone, the chamber would not open again and nobody would get hurt. He still clung to the naive hope that maybe only the book was the problem. He never expected Neville to find it. At the time, Ron had calmed a little. He'd heard the rumor that the heir 50 years ago had been Hagrid and had felt a small relief. In panic, though, Neville hid the diary and kept it to himself, and Ron never found out. When he did discover that Neville had been found talking happily to Tom Riddle in the diary, Ron was stunned. He felt like the ground had dropped away. "If I had been brave enough to tell everything back then," Ron sobbed, "none of this would have happened. Dumbledore and Hagrid wouldn't have been accused and driven away. It's all my fault. I'm a coward." His tears came fresh and he couldn't control them. Ted pulled him into a quick, awkward hug. "Don't cry," he said. "Don't blame yourself. Who could have known how this would go? You're telling us now, aren't you?" "It's not too late." Jerry nodded. "Right. Come on, Ron. Keep going." Ron tried to go on between hiccups. He couldn't bear the idea of being sent to Azkaban, so he had tried to deal with things in the only way he could think of, stealing the diary back. He had sneaked into the Gryffindor dormitory to take it. It wasn't Ginny who had robbed the dormitory. It was him. He'd tried to destroy the diary, but it wouldn't burn or tear, so he had thrown it somewhere he thought no one would find it, the abandoned girls' lavatory, right in the toilet. He'd been certain no one would admit to going into that place. For a while, things were quiet. Then victims started to appear again. Lavender Brown was petrified. Ron went back to the lavatory, and the diary was gone. The Quidditch match got canceled. 2 more victims turned up, and by then Ron had shrunk into himself, waiting for judgment. He had been terrified ever since. Then, after everything that had happened earlier that day and the surprise of the battle, he found himself sitting in the flying car again, the same seat where the school year had begun to fall apart. This time, he finally had the courage to tell all of it. They wouldn't speak. A hush fell over the little group, as if any sound might topple Ron completely. When he finally stopped, the silence tightened. Jerry's breath hitched. "Ron opened the Chamber of Secrets?" he whispered. Neville stared at him, bewildered. "And he can speak Parseltongue?" Someone muttered that maybe he'd learned it from Ron talking in his sleep. Ron had been crying. His hair was damp and his face a mess of tears and blotches, but when he spoke again, his voice had a brittle steadiness to it. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand, gripped the steering wheel as if it were a lifeline, and said, "If I'd said something sooner, if I'd told Hagrid or Dumbledore what I heard, none of this might have happened. It's my fault. I won't run away anymore. I'm going to turn myself in to Professor McGonagall. If they send me to Azkaban, I deserve it. I have to get Hagrid back. I have to get Dumbledore back." There was a quiet, a small, fierce light in his eyes that made Ted put a hand on his shoulder. "Calm down, Ron," Ted said. "Nobody's going to persecute a 12-year-old forever. Even adults would hesitate to press charges when there's so much confusion. Think about it. 50 years ago, the chamber was opened, and the real culprit was never caught. You aren't going to be hounded like that." "His influence?" Harry asked, frowning. Hermione leaned forward, head cocked, eyes narrowing. You've been working on this for a while, haven't you? You think you know who the heir is, and the monster in the chamber is a basilisk." Ted lifted both hands. "All right, I'll say it. I've been looking into it. My bet is that the heir from 50 years ago was you-know-who." The words landed like gravel. Neville's face set hard. "You-know-who?" he said, voice low, suddenly fierce. "So that's who did it? 50 years ago, when that girl died and Hagrid was blamed, who did the framing?" "Tom Riddle," Ron said, the name making him shudder. "The diary. Tom Riddle's diary. He's got a trophy in the trophy room. I had to polish it until I nearly threw up. Tom Riddle. I hate him." Ted tapped his wand against his palm and let letters hang in the air. Tom Marvolo Riddle. With a quick flick, they rearranged into "I am Lord Voldemort." He didn't even have to explain after that. 50 years ago, he opened the chamber, and a muggle-born girl, Myrtle, died. Things got so bad, the school almost closed. To cover it up, he framed Hagrid for raising an acromantula and got him expelled. "It was him," Neville hissed. Harry clenched his jaw. "And now he's back?" "Not necessarily," Ted said. "It might be the diary. How did that diary end up around here?" "Ginny said she might have picked up the wrong book at the bookstore," Ron muttered. "Do you remember anything else about the shop?" Ted pressed. Ron's face went pale as he remembered the commotion earlier. There was a fight. Dad and old Malfoy started fighting, and then Diagon Alley. Everything went weird. He stopped. Something in his expression said he suspected more than he could prove. Maybe Lucius Malfoy, old Malfoy, had something to do with it. Ted frowned. "No proof. For now, we need to deal with the chamber being opened again. Dumbledore's been forced out, Hagrid's in trouble, and there's a basilisk loose in the school." "A basilisk?" Jerry's excitement died outright, and his grin vanished. "What's a basilisk?" Ted pointed to the goggles hanging around his own neck. "I told you to keep your anti-death goggles on you. You didn't, did you?" Jerry patted the goggles ferociously. "Of course I have them. They're brilliant." "The basilisk kills by looking at you," Ted said. "If you see its eyes directly, you die. It's ancient, and it can move through the castle because of the pipes in the walls. That's how it gets around. That's how it reached people and pets. That's why the first victim was found near standing water, Myrtle's bathroom." Hermione's face lit up. "So the entrance to the chamber is in that old lavatory where Myrtle haunts." "And I tried to find Myrtle before," Ted added, "but some magic drove her away." That decided it. They had a place to search. They hurried back toward the castle, but the castle was no longer calm. Professors' voices echoed through corridors, clipped and urgent, Professor McGonagall's the loudest. "All students return to their common rooms at once. No wandering. Violators will face immediate expulsion." The Great Hall was a tangle of jostling, panicked students. Rumors raced. Another attack. The the monster loose and fighting the professors, the headmaster gone. Some wanted to run home, others clung together and shook. The prefects tried to form lines but were overwhelmed. Ted didn't hesitate. He cast Sonorous on himself and climbed on a bench. His voice, magnified and clear, cut through the chaos like a bucket of cold water. "Everyone, stop! Calm down! Follow your head boy or head girl to your common rooms. No pushing, no talking. Trust the professors. Dumbledore will sort this out. We have information about the chamber, and we're taking it to the staff. Wizards, grip your wands." The students straightened like a mass that had been stretched tight and then relaxed into orderly lines. The older students and prefects moved to shepherd them away. Ted and his friends exchanged quick, tense looks, then pushed through the dispersing students toward where the professors were gathered. 10 minutes earlier, McGonagall and the others had seen fresh blood-red script across a corridor wall. "His bones will lie in the Chamber of Secrets forever." Their faces were grave. The chamber had been opened and someone taken. "Severus, activate the school's defensive enchantments," McGonagall was saying, voice forced. "Phileas, check who's been taken. I'll find a way into the headmaster's office, see if I can contact Professor Dumbledore." They were all on edge. Dumbledore, the heart of the school, was gone, and no one knew how long Hogwarts could hold together without him. Lockhart arrived at that moment, breathless and polished as ever. He started to boast, only to stumble when he saw the message on the wall. He froze, then babbled and fled for his office. I'll find it, I will. Yes, just give me time." McGonagall's look said everything. "Professor Lockhart, you will find the chamber, and you will rescue the student." As the professors dispersed to their tasks, Ted and his friends reached the corridor and read the same threat. Ron's hands trembled. "Who was taken?" he asked. Ted had heard it in a whisper. Slytherin students talking that Malfoy was missing. He swallowed. "I heard they can't find Malfoy." The reaction around him was instant. Jerry sneered. Ron looked stunned and oddly guilty. "Malfoy? He's pure blood," Ron blurted, then caught himself. Harry's eyes were hard. "He wouldn't deserve this, even if he's a prat." Neville shook his head fervently. "We can't leave him. Whoever's in that chamber is hunting students, not their family trees. Malfoy or no Malfoy, we have to try and save whoever was taken." Hermione looked at Ted, searching his face for the decision she wished he'd already made. He let out a breath and made it. The closest place to start was Lockhart's office. It was near the area the attack had happened, and despite Lockhart's bluster, he might have something useful. "Lockhart's office, then," Ted said. "He's been quiet lately, but he can at least block a spell if worse comes." Grudgingly, the others nodded. They moved together, a small knot of determined faces through a school suddenly full of fear, toward the office of the most embarrassing professor in Hogwarts, and, they hoped, toward a way to the Chamber of Secrets. Level up. Level up. Before he went to look for Lockhart, Ted still had one very important task. He needed to level up. "Hermione, wait here for a moment. I'm going back to the dormitory to fetch something. I'll be right back." Hermione nodded, and Ted hurried out of the main tower. He had been sitting on a huge pile of experience for months. He could have leveled up long ago, but he never had. He often told himself, "Let's wait. Maybe next month's otherworld knowledge will bring something big." But he knew that wasn't the real reason. The truth was, he was afraid. Experience points were scarce and valuable, but compared to the daily, disciplined work of studying magic, they felt like a cheap, easy power. After he pushed his Mind Mage level to 4 last summer and suddenly found the spirit within him surging out of control, he had grown wary. Could he truly handle power that arrived so easily? As a Mind Mage, he had learned to be cautious. Eastern thought emphasized mastery of the mind. If the mind couldn't control the power would eventually control the mind. He worried that a single peak of strength could make him reckless, that the intoxicating feeling of invincibility would cloud his judgment. So for the past year, he had purposely resisted the temptation to level up immediately. He spent that time honing his control, mastering spells, adapting spells from Azeroth and D&D, and studying alchemy. He forced himself to slow down. Now, however, he needed power. He was about to face a half-resurrected young Lord Voldemort and a basilisk. This was not a staged confrontation with Dumbledore's script and safety net. This was real. He had to be ready to go all out. During the holiday, he had even debated whether to intervene at all. There were shortcuts. Take the diary to Professor McGonagall and let the adults handle it. But he asked himself if he could keep avoiding these fights forever. Voldemort had Horcruxes. He would return. The Hill Giant rampage in Diagon Alley at the end of the holiday had made one thing clear. The world had changed. Avoiding a battle when it was inevitable was not an option. He had to learn to fight and to win. This was only the beginning. Treat it as a trial. He needed power. He focused inward. His experience pool held 34,854 XP. Thanks to that cluster of acromegalas he had farmed, the number looked like dozens of little victories sewn together. To raise his wizard profession to level 5 required 15,000 XP, and to reach level 6 required 21,000. With the minus 20% reduction from the study god purple talent, he needed 32,400 total, and he had enough. Finding an empty washroom cubicle, he tucked himself inside and concentrated. Upgrade wizard profession. The XP in his pool flowed out like water. The wizard profession surged up twice, and he jumped to level 6. He gained 2 attribute points and 2 skill points. He assigned +1 agility to cover a weakness. His agility moved to 5, roughly the neural reaction speed of a grown man, so it wouldn't hold him back. He added +1 spirit to deepen his advantage. Spirit rose to 15, 3 times that of ordinary people, and about twice that of a normal wizard. Higher spirit sharpened his control and amplified spell power. He also gained a level of raw magic. The power burst out of him, literally lifting him off the floor and shattering the cubicle as a sapphire blue radiance flared around him. The light flickered and only subsided after more than 10 seconds. His naked magic level was now 6. With the wand's enhancement and the pseudo-philosopher's stone, his effective magic level reached 9, roughly on par with Severus Snape. Snape's magic was the highest among the Hogwarts staff, and, apart from Dumbledore, the school was hard-pressed to find anyone better. That peak had come from talent and from years of dark arts and potion work. Ted, not even in his 3rd year, had reached it thanks to system bonuses and equipment. Ted could feel the wand had reached its enhancement limit. Further increases in his magic level would no longer be boosted by the wand. The pseudo-philosopher's stone still had some headroom, though. Unexpectedly, hitting naked magic level 6 also bumped his magic resistance up by 1 tier. He now had magic resistance level 3. Last year he'd tested his limits against Jerry, who was magic level 2 and spell level 2. A blasting curse might be resisted 7 or 8 times out of 10. Against someone like Hermione, stronger and higher level, he couldn't block it at all. At best, he could weaken the effect. With resistance level 3, he finally had room to test whether he could stand against level 3 magic. For the other skill point, he upgraded his spell proficiency. His base spell rank had been naked level 5. With the wand's boost, it jumped to level 6. Even if he couldn't match Professor Flitwick, few Aurors or magically elite folk reached level 6 spellcasting. Previously, his Charms class level had capped his spell effectiveness around 4, wand boost adding +1, but that restriction was fading. He could advance much faster now. Leveling that spell also granted an unexpected bonus, Magic Penetration level 1. This stat reduces an opponent's magic resistance by 1 tier when they face his magic. If a foe had magic resistance 5 and his magic level was 5, ordinarily they'd likely shrug it off. With penetration 1, they'd effectively be treated as resistance 4 and could be overwhelmed. This was huge. Many magical creatures had absurdly high innate resistance. Ted glanced at his experience pool again. He spent the remaining 2,400-odd XP upgrading 2 offensive spells to level 5, Eye Disease Curse and Sectum Sempra. The Eye Disease Curse was trainable given time, but Sectum Sempra was advanced dark magic, painfully hard to improve. Using Sectum Sempra at full power yielded almost nothing in practice. 4 or 5 casts might only give him 1 point of proficiency. Conservatively, it would take thousands of full-power castings to level it normally. It wasn't a video game where you could hold a button and grind XP. After a dozen or 20 full-power releases, he felt his energy dissipate and his temples throb. As expected of high-level dark arts, it was brutal on the caster. Still, these two spells would likely be his primary damage options against the basilisk. He couldn't afford them to be weak. Fortunately, Study God's tiny 20% effect made the upgrades possible. All the experience he'd hoarded for more than half a year was gone. Money spent, worries eased. Ted waved a hand, and wandless and nonverbal cast a mending charm. The broken tiles and bricks lifted, snapped back into place, and the cubicle repaired itself. The whole thing had been a bit dramatic. He straightened his clothes, stepped out, and found Hermione waiting. "Ted, you're back?" "Yes, let's go find Lockhart." Ted and Hermione knocked on Professor Lockhart's office door. "Who is it?" came Lockhart's voice from inside. Before he could answer, they pushed the door open. "Professor, we heard. Malfoy was attacked. The Chamber of Secrets. Someone was taken. We heard you're heading the investigation. We have clues. Wait, what are you doing?" Ted's puzzled look left Hermione, who was standing behind him, stunned. She had expected him to act a certain way when they found Lockhart, to stop him from casting any memory charms. Instead, he was pretending to know nothing, and Hermione had to hide as much of her face behind him as possible, afraid her expression would give her away. Lockhart was caught in the act. He had a wig in his hands and was trying to stuff it in his suitcase. For a moment, he looked as if the castle might swallow him whole. I was just tidying up. I have so many things. Tidying is a good habit. Have I ever told you how my neatness won me the favor of a witch? Let me." He began to ramble, but Ted cut him off. "Professor, what time is it? We don't have time for trimming cloaks. We must go to the Chamber of Secrets and save Malfoy. We've already found the entrance." "The Chamber's entrance. Yes, the chamber." Lockhart tried to dodge. His eyes skimmed the room, his grinning portrait on the wall, his ostentatious robes, a pile of fan letters he hadn't answered. Anything but look at them. This was his favorite pupil, always admiring, always reliable, and now he couldn't possibly go into a deadly chamber. He hadn't faced anything like that at school. What was Dumbledore doing? Had he lost his mind? He began, evasive. "I have my own plans. We can't alert the enemy, you know." "If you go with us, you'll be the savior of Hogwarts," Ted pressed. "Think about it. You'd be a national hero, a shining star of the British wizarding community. The Ministry would award you a first-class Order of Merlin. Reporters, fans, everyone would adore you." The image hit Lockhart like a warm breeze. He pictured the minister crowning him, cameras flashing, hordes of swooning witches. It was intoxicating until reality intruded. The Chamber of Secrets housed a monster that had even Dumbledore stumped. Going in might be a one-way trip. Lockhart snapped. All right, I won't." He slammed the wig down, kicked it, ground it with a flurry of self-pity. Why did I come back to this blasted school? No honor, no praise, no flowers, no applause. Those wizards treat me like a fool. Curse it all. An adult breakdown was abrupt and furious. He ranted about shampoo and hair loss, about reporters and publishers. For a second, Ted's eyes flickered with something like pity, then steel. When Lockhart finally calmed enough to speak rationally, his resentment had hardened into something like spite. "When I returned as a professor, I wanted to build a relationship with my students and burnish my reputation," he fumed. "But Longbottom, he never appreciated me. If he'd been sensible like you, Ted," his gaze sharpened, "you should never have come, honestly." Ted's face went stone. "Professor Lockhart, I'll ask you one last time. Are you coming to save Malfoy?" "Don't bother, Ted." Lockhart's hand drifted subtly toward his waist. "And besides, those tales in my books, surely they're based on my experiences." Ted spoke quietly, deliberately. "Professor, I've known you longer than most. Many of the spells you describe, you don't actually know. Some basic facts in your books you misunderstand. Even your romantic letters don't match themselves from one to the next. I've read similar accounts in foreign magical newspapers, and the heroes weren't you." The words struck Lockhart like a dagger. His legs wobbled and a cold sweat broke out along his back. He stammered, the facade collapsing. "Ah, yes, they aren't my experiences. I met those wizards. I coaxed their stories out of them, and I wrote them as my own. But it's not my fault. It's the reader's fault," he burst out, suddenly self-justifying. "Readers want a story with me at the center. Who would prefer to read about an old, grim, scarred wizard solving a female ghost in Bandung, or a wizened witch driving off a werewolf with an amulet, or a gaunt ascetic feeding a yeti on a mountain? I polished the stories. I made them popular. What did I do wrong? He sat at his desk, hands hidden, and slid his fingers beneath the desk to his wand. His eyes flicked to Ted, then to the studious girl behind him, Hermione. He decided on a surprise memory charm. A quick obliteration of the day would clear everything. But before he could draw his wand, a flash of color streaked through the room. Pain lanced across the back of Lockhart's hand, and his wand tumbled from his fingers onto the floor. Where the wand had been, a gigantic rooster now perched on the desk. It was an absurdly large bird, its plumage a riot of colors, a bright red comb, and a dramatic crest of white feathers that made it look almost coiffed. Its talons were as big as boot-sized feet, golden yellow and wickedly sharp. Even perched on the desk, it stood over 2 meters tall, looking down at Lockhart with an insolent, regal disdain. Ted grinned. Behind the humor of the moment was meticulous planning. He had been thinking about ways to carry his modified creature in case they encountered something like a basilisk. He'd used ideas from Pokemon breeding, the ability to contain a beast in a small, portable object, though he had no real knowledge of Pokeballs. He improvised. By combining an undetectable extension charm with magic similar to a bag of holding and some alchemical work to create a physical core, he'd produced a walnut-sized fantastic beast ball. He took it out, clicked, and released the bird, Chicken Bro, with a chirp. The bird, faster than its size suggested, pecked Lockhart's hand so hard the wand flew free. Ted waved his own wand and made the wand float to his hand. "Professor," he said calmly, "if you don't want your little secret exposed, you'd better come with us to save Malfoy. The Malfoys are a powerful pure-blood family. If you help, if you save Xenophilius, old Malfoy will remember you kindly. But if you abandon him," Ted added, "old Malfoy, grieving for his son, could very well take it out on you." There was none of the earlier pleading in Ted's voice. Lockhart, face pale, suddenly realized he had misread his favorite pupil entirely. He forced a wan smile. "Very well, Ted. You're right. I'll go with you to the Chamber of Secrets to save him. Can I have my wand back, though? I can't very well go into a battle empty-handed." Ted weighed the cherry-wood wand in his hand, then nodded. "Don't worry, Professor. I'll give it back to you before the battle." Lockhart felt that he could do it again. Ted reasoned with the dear Professor Lockhart and successfully persuaded him. "Let's go, Professor. Please lead the way," Ted said, gesturing invitingly. The chicken bro on the desk lowered its head, approached, and peered down at Lockhart. Lockhart, seeing the golden beak longer than his own fingers, felt a chill run through him. He forced a smile, rose, and stepped forward. He shuffled like a man walking to the scaffold, each step heavy, his heart sinking. Suddenly Ted stopped. Only then did Lockhart realize where they had come to, the corridor where the writing first appeared, where it had said the Chamber of Secrets had been opened. Could the entrance be here? Lockhart jolted. This was just down the corridor from his office. "Let's go, Professor," Ted urged, and led them into the abandoned lavatory. Lockhart hesitated and looked carefully. It was the girls' lavatory, the Chamber of Secrets. In the girls' bathroom? He almost burst into tears. It had been right beside him, in the girls' bathroom. Who could possibly find that? Unbelievable. Inside, the lavatory was surprisingly large. Lockhart had never been here before, and he looked around with morbid curiosity. No urinals, a ring of wash basins in the middle, a row of little stalls. A few students were already there. Neville, Hermione, and the others. Lockhart should have realized sooner. The 6 of them were inseparable, so of course they were together. Neville and Ron looked at Ted as if to ask why he had dragged Lockhart along to block spells. "Any clues?" Ted asked. Jerry quickly raised a hand and leaned toward a faucet. "This tap doesn't produce water," she said excitedly, "and there's a snake-shaped carving on the side." Ted glanced at Neville. "Neville, it's your turn. Say open to it, in Parseltongue." Parseltongue! Lockhart suddenly had a flash of understanding. Of course, Slytherin was supposedly a Parseltongue. Using Parseltongue as a way to find his heir made sense. But could Neville be Slytherin's heir? Not a bit of Slytherin showed in him. He'd sooner believe Neville was Gryffindor's heir. Still, Neville's ability to speak Parseltongue was undeniable. Neville approached the faucet, looking confused, then at his friends, and finally at the old tap. He opened his mouth. Open. Nothing happened. "You're speaking English? Neville, use Parseltongue." Jerry hissed. Neville had never used Parseltongue before and hated the idea. He was lost. Ted guided him. Neville, look at the tap. Imagine it as a snake, cold, slimy, waiting for you to command it. Say open. Following Ted's lead, Neville's mouth produced a hissing sound like a snake flicking its tongue. The circle of wash basins began to move, just like the moving walls at the Leaky Cauldron in Diagon Alley. The basins spread apart and revealed a hole nearly 2 meters across. A fetid, stale smell rose from it, like a room whose windows had never been opened. Ted nudged the still-dazed Lockhart in the small of his back with his wand. Professor, you first. Set an example for the students. Lockhart almost cried. He didn't want to die. When had Ted become so practical? He couldn't remember. But magic gathered on Ted's wand, and Lockhart had no choice. He swallowed his fear, shut his eyes, and jumped. The hole opened onto a long, smooth pipe. Lockhart slid down at terrifying speed, his backside rubbing horribly against the shaft. 10 seconds felt like an eternity. His bottom burned, and he screamed. The sound dwindled in the pipe. He had slid a long way. Ted shrugged at the others. My turn. I recommend using greased soles on your backside, he said dryly. Professor Lockhart's scream was tragic. Ted cast several spells on himself, then floated down into the pipe. The rest went after him, one every 5 seconds. They slid for 5 or 6 minutes before finally hitting level ground. It was dark and damp, bones scattered across the soil. Ted guessed they must be deep beneath the castle, perhaps under the Black Lake. Lockhart lay in a corner, covering his backside with both hands in a humiliating, face-down, despairing heap, groaning softly and not daring to be loud. His trousers were torn. Whatever dignity he'd had not survived the slide. The others couldn't help glancing at him with a new, rueful appreciation for Ted's earlier advice. What is this place? Hermione whispered. Tiny bones crunched underfoot. It should be underground, Ted said. The Chamber of Secrets can't be far. Everyone put on your goggles. Lockhart watched, bewildered, as the 6 of them strapped on cool goggles. It was already dark. Sunglasses now seemed absurd. He thought briefly about going back, inviting the headmaster, and letting the adults handle it. But Ted snapped his fingers, and Ansu, who had been invisible moments before, materialized, circling above their heads, then flying ahead to scout. In Ted's other hand, the spirit crystal servant Parker pulsed, sensing psychical entities nearby. They had to be cautious. With Ansu leading, they moved slowly. After 7 or 8 minutes, Ansu signaled a discovery. Through Ansu's eyes, Ted saw a giant snake, motionless, its color faded. It wasn't skin on a living snake, but a shed skin, coiled and tremendous. Reptiles shed to grow. This coiled, pale snakeskin was about 1 meter across, and coiled as it was, must have been at least 20 meters long. A giant snake, indeed. Here, Ted whispered, and they drew closer. The pile of shed skin towered 2 or 3 people high. They stared, stunned. Lockhart's mind spun. Ron had said the monster in the Chamber of Secrets was a basilisk. A basilisk that size, one look, and you were dead. If he kept going with these children, risking everything to save someone, he might not survive. Suddenly, Lockhart saw a plan. If he could subdue the children, erase their memories with a memory charm, and haul this massive snakeskin away, he'd not only survive, but also return a hero. He watched Ron, whose wand was tucked into his waistband. An ambush, Lockhart thought. He lunged, snatched Ron's wand, and without waiting for a cry, pointed it and cast the most powerful Obliviate he could muster at Ted, who stood at the front. Obliviate. Instead of hitting Ted, Ron's wand, wrapped in tape, flared strangely in Lockhart's hand. A green light burst from its tip and struck Lockhart square in the chest. He shot upward, hitting the rock ceiling 3 meters above before collapsing to the ground in a motionless heap, dust rising around him. Ron stared as if he'd seen a ghost. He's not dead, is he? He stammered, terrified his wand had killed someone. Professor Lockhart? Professor? They called, tentative as they had been in the dueling club. Lockhart's eyelids fluttered. Then he grinned and let out a childish, gurgling laugh. Ha! Ha! Ted sensed it immediately with his psionic awareness. Lockhart's psychical core was almost completely wiped. He had been scrubbed clean, reset to factory settings. Lockhart's mastery of the memory charm had been formidable. He'd poured everything into the spell in a desperate bid. The backfire had struck him with 3 times the power, and it had erased him. What remained now was the simple, unfocused innocence of a baby. 175. Baby sleep, Professor? Professor Lockhart! Neville tried to call to him, but Lockhart just kept giggling, his hands and feet restless, gesturing wildly. What's wrong with him? Harry asked, worried. Ted explained, Professor Lockhart's memory charm backfired. He's lost his memories. He's regressed to an infantile state. Ah? Hermione looked between Ted and Lockhart, sensing some connection. Ron, on the other hand, breathed a sigh of relief. Good thing he's not dead, he muttered. But when he glanced down, he discovered his wand, borrowed from his older brother, was snapped clean in two. He wouldn't dare try to use it, even if it worked. Ted tossed Lockhart's cherrywood wand to him. Ron, you can use this for now. Lockhart, lying on the ground, saw Ron fiddling with the cherrywood wand and reached for it with delighted gurgles. Ron backed away. When Lockhart didn't get it, he immediately pouted, eyes narrowing as he started to cry. Wah, wah, wah! What do we do now? Hermione asked, helpless as she watched the crying man. Harry didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and delivered a sharp uppercut to Lockhart's chin. Lockhart's head snapped back, and with a heavy thud, he went silent, slumped into an infant-like sleep. Neville and Hermione stared at Harry, stunned. Ron and Jerry erupted into cheers. Nice hit, Harry. I've wanted to do that for ages. Ted hurriedly pulled back the two who were about to kick Lockhart some more. That's enough. He's a child now, no more. Ding, mission complete. Infant-like sleep. Reward, 350 XP. Card, memory charm. Ted smiled, he'd guessed right. Getting Lockhart to the Chamber of Secrets and staging the original plan had been a mission, apparently one of those hidden objectives that grants a reward on completion. The card read, Memory Charm Blue. Spell card usage, raises your memory charm to ELV 5. Uses, 1/1 memory charm is not taught at school. It's a self-taught discipline, but this card instantly raises it to ELV 5. With Lockhart taken care of, it was time to face the basilisk. Ted put on a worried expression, and Hermione immediately picked up on the change. What's wrong, Ted? Is something off? Ted shook his head. We need to rescue Malfoy, but the basilisk won't be easy. I have methods, unusual ones. I learned them from an inheritance. The word inheritance made Hermione's eyes narrow. She realized he meant the things left in Ravenclaw's Chamber of Secrets, the books, materials, research only Ted could access. So, she prompted. So my next methods might be strange, Ted said. He was secretly pleased he had exclusive access to Ravenclaw's legacy. It explained his otherworld knowledge without having to hide it. Ravenclaw's lost wisdom could plausibly account for it. Harry grew impatient. He didn't want to waste time. Ted, we're friends. Nothing you show us will shock us. If it helps save Malfoy, just do it. If we delay, Malfoy could be torn apart by that snake. Ron and Jerry snickered at Harry's bluntness. Ted nodded and apologized. All right, get ready. Summon. The wand in Ted's hand glowed blue and traced an elaborate pattern in the air. After about 20 seconds, a faint blue emblem hovered overhead. The flourish was mostly for show. Ted could have summoned without a wand or spoken spell, but the spectacle made everyone take it seriously. Come forth, troll. Earth Golem. A 2-meter-67 tall troll stomped into the clearing, bringing with it a nauseating stench. Jerry's nose wrinkled and tears sprang to his eyes. Ted hurriedly cast a bubblehead charm over the group. He had almost forgotten to account for the troll's odor. The troll, club as thick as a tree trunk in hand, looked around, scratching its huge head with clumsy carrot-thick fingers, utterly bewildered. Everyone backed away warily. Beside it stood a second summon, a silent, squat earth golem, shorter than the troll but denser and steadier, standing like a wall. Ron gaped at the pair. Ted couldn't help a proud smile. This is the result of my research. Hermione blinked. You researched trolls? Tsk. Not that I can create them. I studied summoning magic. We already know the troll archetype from before, so I used that model. The other is an earth-based summon. Both will only last 10 minutes. Harry's impatience flared again. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go. Ted put a hand up. Don't rush. I estimate the basilisk is close. We should prepare, and don't worry about Malfoy. Whatever lured us here won't harm him until we arrive. They'd been at school nearly 2 years now, and had come a long way in their magic. Most of them had learned frost armor, only Jerry and Neville hadn't learned the shield charm. Jerry, however, had picked up greased souls and the human shrinking charm. The shrinking charm could proportionally reduce humanoids. Jerry could shrink others to 3/4 their size at most, but he could shrink himself to 1/5, becoming only 30 centimeters tall. He was something of a prodigy. Ted had only mastered that kind of summoning a few months earlier. Neville had learned evil protection and the enlarged charm. Evil protection required a certain strength of will and was not widely mastered. Only Hermione and Neville among their companions knew it. The enlarged charm allowed proportional enlargement of a person or object. It was safer than the engorgement charm, which blew creatures up like balloons and incapacitated them. Neville could enlarge himself by a full size, reaching 182 centimeters with thicker limbs and a larger head. They all took a moment to cast shields and protections on themselves and their summoned allies, steeling themselves for whatever lay ahead. 176. Senior Tom Ted had renamed the new Bubblehead charm the Safety Helmet charm. Beyond the original Bubblehead's air filtration and underwater breathing, this version offered elastic, impact-absorbing protection. Ted had gone further, integrating the shield charm to make the Safety Helmet charm Type 2, which evolved from a helmet into full-body coverage. With additional work, it could even take on the Disillusionment charm's effect, becoming Safety Helmet charm Type 3. Ted treated it like a modular motherboard for spells. So long as a spell wasn't inherently incompatible, it could be slotted in. Its potential was enormous. It waterproofed, filtered toxic gases, insulated against heat transfer, blocked sound, and could grant invisibility, modifications made specifically with the basilisk in mind. Snakes sense heat as well as sight, so combining shield and bubblehead at the system level had replaced the old charms. It should be considered a mid to high level spell, currently level 2. Its incantation read, "Danger is inevitable." The students were encased in transparent protective armor from head to toe, spacesuit-like, bulky in appearance but weightless and completely unrestricted. They couldn't hear one another through the helmets, but Ted solved that by using mind power to create a short-range communication network so everyone could speak their minds directly. Wow. Jerry peered at his protected hands, delighted. Hello, hello, hello. Can you hear me? Ron was testing the mic on his end. Besides the Safety Helmet charm, they'd been given Shield charm, Evil protection, Mage armor, Energy shield, Slow fall, Greased souls, and finally Arcane wisdom. When Ted and Hermione cast Arcane wisdom on the group, everyone felt it immediately, a bright, clear sense of thought. Ron complained over the mind power link. Ted, Hermione, why didn't you use this sooner? I want to know what it's like to be smart too. Ted was too embarrassed to point out that even with Arcane wisdom, Ron still had room to grow. Harry, whose intelligence attribute wasn't low to begin with, felt genuinely sharper. After those last preparations, they were ready. Ted also supplied protections for the troll and the earth golem, mainly covering the troll's eyes so Ted could control it with mind power and prevent it from being petrified by a stare. They advanced. A circular door carved with writhing snakes blocked their path. Neville didn't need prompting. He stepped forward and hissed in Parseltongue, "Open." The relief snakes slid toward the center. Gears clanked somewhere inside the mechanism, and the great circular door rolled open like a bank vault. Ted used the Ravenclaw Wisdom Blue card to boost his own faculties. High intelligence and spirit attributes amplified their magic, and told the group over the Mind Power Network, "Follow me, I'll lead." He wove the invisibility effect into everyone's safety helmet charm, and they slipped through unseen. Beyond the door lay a cavernous chamber, about half the size of a football field. 2 rows of enormous braziers flared to life as the door opened, throwing the space into harsh, flickering light. A straight passage ran before them, flanked by massive, venomous snake statues. At the passage's end, the floor opened into a vast chamber, where tiles and scorch marks suggested something huge had once lain there. At the far end loomed an enormous human head statue, far larger than the Leshan giant Buddhas, but gaunt and wrinkled, with a long beard that made it seem unapproachable. This was Slytherin. Ted remembered the portraits of the 4 founders from Ravenclaw's Chamber of Secrets. Gryffindor had been a tall, blonde giant, Hufflepuff a short, kindly woman. Slytherin's portrait had always been grave, bald, and stern, majestic despite the severity. This statue now, however, looked diseased and monkey-like. Had Slytherin delved so far into dark arts that his appearance altered in old age? The Ravenclaw diary had recorded the early schism. About a decade after Hogwarts was founded, Slytherin's philosophy diverged. Witch hunts were common back then. Most ordinary people who awakened could learn only a few simple, specialized spells. If discovered by a mob, they stood little chance, like a witch being lynched with pitchforks. Slytherin, furious and bitter, proposed refusing students from non-magical families and teaching lethal dark arts to those he favored. The other three founders disagreed, arguing peace would come in time and violence would only escalate the conflict. Their disputes mounted until Slytherin withdrew, building a secret underground chamber of secrets to teach his chosen students. Centuries later, the Gaunt family used Parseltongue to find and use that chamber, and later a young Tom Riddle discovered it in his 5th year. He reopened the chamber, and the basilisk's gaze killed Myrtle, an event Dumbledore watched closely. Tom Riddle later turned the murder into the creation of his first Horcrux, the diary. That diary Horcrux contained his emotions and memories, making it uniquely dangerous in ways later Horcruxes were not. Harry had been watching intently since they entered. A short distance from the Slytherin statue, she spotted Malfoy on the floor, his face as white as paper. His hair hung messily over his forehead. He looked like he might collapse from weakness at any moment. Harry's heart tightened, but she forced herself to remain calm and not disturb Ted's plan. Then, from behind the great statue, a boy stepped out. He looked 16 or 17, deep brown hair parted in the middle, a handsome, clean-cut face, tall and straight-backed, a small, reserved smile touching his mouth. In his hand, he held Malfoy's wand. Neville felt his forehead flare hot beneath the invisibility effect. His scar throbbed with a burning sting. The young man called into the empty space, voice smooth and confident. "All right, welcome. I've been waiting a while. How about we introduce ourselves openly?" A beat passed with no response. The young man's eyes grew colder. "I say, isn't it you, the boy who lived, Neville Longbottom? Then I'd be very disappointed." Ted tapped Neville through the mind power link. Neville drew a steadying breath and stepped forward. The invisibility effect faded, and he emerged into the passage. "I heard you were looking for me?" 177, Senior Tom's Declaration of Shame, Horcrux, 1 Riddle level, level 5 Wizard, level 3 Dark Wizard, level 2 Slytherin Bloodline, level 1 Horcrux. Remnant Soul Attributes: Strength 1, Constitution 1, Agility 5, Intelligence 7, Perception 6, Spirit 14, Charisma 7, Luck. Talents: Slytherin Descendant, Red, Parseltongue, +2 levels, Dark Arts, +2 levels. Intelligent, Red. Intelligence attribute is considered +20% when learning magic. Magic Surge, Blue, Magic +2 levels, Skills: Magic, Magic Resistance, Spell level 5, Transfiguration level 4, Potions level 4, Herbology level 2, Dark Arts level 6, Magical Creatures level 3, Ancient Runes level 2. Magic: Cutting Curse level 5, Crushing Curse level 5, Incendio level 5, Fiendfire level 4, Expelliarmus level 4, Stupefy level 4, Killing Curse level 3, Cruciatus level 2, Septic Curse level 2, Heartrending Curse level 1, Imperio level 1. Evaluation: Young Tom Riddle in a special form, still fledgling, but already showing his potential. Ted, who'd leveled up himself and could read these things more clearly now, took it in at a glance. Even without the full magic list displayed, it was obvious how widely he'd dabbled and how many dark arts he'd mastered. At 16, he'd already opened the Chamber of Secrets less than a year earlier. Much of this knowledge likely came from Slytherin's lair. The abnormal readings for magic and magic resistance probably came from his current state. A Horcrux is not easily harmed by magic, so his resistance is essentially maxed. It even looked as if he'd siphoned off some of Malfoy's magic, effectively weakening Malfoy. Tom's attributes were lavish for his age. No wonder he was as dangerous as he was. The boy who lived, Neville Longbottom, level 3 Wizard, level 1 Warrior. Attributes: Strength 4, Constitution 5, Agility 5, Intelligence 5, Perception 5, Spirit 7, Charisma 6, Luck 10. Talents: Destined Savior, Purple, Magic +1 level, Luck +10, deeply entangled in the whirlpool of destiny. Resilience, Blue, body and will are very strong, 15% resistance to negative effects. Parseltongue, Blue, naturally able to communicate with snakes and command them. Skills: Magic level 3, Magic resistance level 1, Spell level 2, Transfiguration level 2, Potions level 3, Herbology level 4. Magic: Scouring Charm level 3, Aguamenti level 3, Growth Charm level 3, Expelliarmus level 2, Stupefy level 2, Frost Armor level 1, Evil Protection level 1, Engorgio level 1, Greased Souls level 1. Evaluation: A young savior just beginning to shine, still in need of careful polishing. The most notable thing was the Destined Savior talent. Only +1 magic level, but +10 luck is significant. No wonder Neville had ended up on the same train as Hermione and Ted. The deeply entangled in the whirlpool of destiny part remained mysterious. The odd warrior profession had appeared after he was credited with defeating Lord Voldemort last year. Ted didn't know the details. Among their group, Hermione and Harry were stronger in skill levels and spell repertoire. Ron, Jerry, and Neville were roughly comparable. "Yes, it's me. What did you do to my classmate?" Neville demanded, low, serious, all fear gone from his face. Tom's tone was pleased. "Very brave. Neville, welcome. I am your senior, Tom Riddle." He sounded as if he enjoyed the moment. After all, he'd been talking to Neville through the diary for days. As for Malfoy, the one who loves to show off and grab the spotlight, he's fine. He's about to croak, though. Tom's victory was clear. He began to indulge in it, telling the story to himself and anyone listening. "Do you know who I first got into the hands of? Your foolish roommate, Ron Weasley." The expression on his face soured at the recollection. That idiot. A few of the eavesdroppers who had been listening invisibly nudged Ron in their mental chatter. "Ron, why's he insulting you?" Ron snapped back through the mental link, reddening. "Shut up, Jerry. Don't ask. What time is it? Ignore him." His words carried shame and guilt, trying to hide the truth. Tom, however, had no interest in sparing Ron's feelings. "That fool wanted to show off, wanted good grades. I tried to teach him for a month, and he couldn't finish a single book. He gave up halfway through. All he did was eat. Eat all day. Those damned chicken legs." Tom stamped his foot in fury. "Counting those 2 cursed galleons every day. And I had to pretend to be a caring older brother, coaxing him and giving him advice." He poured out the whole story. Ron had got the diary over the holidays, but hadn't written much in it. Tom hadn't pressed then. After all, there were adult wizards at home, and Ron had been hard to fool. At school, with the flying car and the Howler incident bruising Ron's pride, he spent a lot of time whining in the diary. Tom absorbed those emotions and the magic that flowed with them. He presented himself as a wise, helpful former student who could get Ron better grades and admiration, and Ron, tempted and in a rebellious phase, took it in. Tom had expected that improving Ron's grades would win trust and more magical energy, but Ron was hopeless. He could barely focus, often quit halfway, misapplied every suggestion Tom gave him, and he was too lazy to use the diary except when absolutely necessary. Tom's plan stalled and nearly failed. It wasn't until Ron's rebellious wand problems manifested that the situation turned. If Ron's wand had worked properly, Tom reasoned, none of this would have happened. Ron couldn't use magic, and that infuriated Tom beyond reason. Eventually, the diary accumulated enough power. Tom controlled Ron into opening the Chamber of Secrets. The basilisk's arrival petrified a cat. Tom went along with the chaos, using Ron to do things the basilisk terrified of, strangle roosters kept by Hagrid. Hagrid, however, had been trying a clay pot chicken recipe taught by a house elf and was already planning to butcher some hens, so he didn't take it seriously. Ron considered telling his friends several times, torn between fear of Azkaban and the diary's influence. At one point, he dropped the notebook and Neville picked it up. When Ron saw that Neville had it, he panicked, stole it back, and threw it away. The discarded diary was later found by Malfoy in the girls' bathroom. Tom went on, savoring his complaints about Ron until he seemed lighter. "It's a pity. Malfoy, though easy to fool, isn't as good as you, Neville. I could have controlled you, the boy who lived, my formidable enemy. What a pity." Neville flinched. He'd been so thoroughly fooled by the boy who'd posed as a kindly senior, he'd even suspected Hagrid. "I don't have any Tom. Who are you?" Neville shouted, "Don't hurry, my dear Neville." Tom smiled and waved his wand. Glowing letters rose into the air. Tom Marvolo Riddle. The letters shifted and rearranged themselves into a new phrase. Tom watched Neville's stunned, speechless face with a smirk of triumph. That's right, that's right. I am. The sentence in the air finished, but not how Tom expected. The letters flowed into a humiliating anagram, and the glowing words read, Mr. Tom, a dildo lover. Tom's triumphant grin froze. The smug satisfaction left his face as the absurd sentence hung there, bright and unmistakable, and everyone who saw it, Neville included, gaped in stunned silence. If Tom had a real flesh-and-blood body right now, he would have spat blood from fury. Who is it? Who's playing tricks? He snarled. He had been trapped in that diary for 50 years. He'd finally found a way out, and the first thing that happened was Ron, then Neville, then Malfoy. Each possession had been a string of failures, taken, exposed, thrown away. If he had been fully himself, he might have had a cerebral hemorrhage from rage. Now, at last, he'd fed enough on Malfoy's emotions and magic to form a semi-corporeal apparition. If he could kill Neville now, he might regain a body. And at this moment, just as he was about to reveal himself, someone was trying to ruin everything. Tom's features twisted with rage. Ron, humiliated by Tom's earlier taunts until he couldn't meet anyone's gaze, burst out laughing. Who? Tom demanded. Ron stepped forward and answered bluntly. It's me, Ron Weasley. You thought you could look down on me. I trusted you back then, you fraud. You'll pay for that. Diffindo. Tom lashed out and cast the cutting charm. Luckily, Ron's dueling instincts were sharp. He slid to the side and the curse whooshed past, harmless. The featherlight charm combined with greased soles made him maddeningly slippery. Expelliarmus, Neville shouted, firing at Tom as Ron dodged. The spell's light sailed right through Tom's semi-corporeal form. He could take and wave a wand and speak spells, but every action drained Malfoy's magic and life. If he pushed Malfoy too far, the boy would die, and Tom would be back in the diary. He couldn't afford to waste Malfoy for a skirmish. So instead of turning on Neville and Ron, Tom pivoted to the tall Slytherin statue and spoke in a cold, demanding tone. Speak to me, Slytherin, greatest of the founders. The mouth of the statue yawned open, becoming a vast black cavity. The sound of something sliding inside echoed from the depths. The basilisk emerged. Warned by Ted, Neville and Ron snapped on their anti-death goggles. Ted raised his hand. Ansu, hidden in the shadows, launched into the air. Darkness seeped from its feathers and spread like ink. In seconds, the entire underground chamber was pitch black. The torches still crackled and burned, but their flames cast no light. Tom had not expected that. Even as a ghost, he feared darkness. Worse, the basilisk's most terrible power was its gaze, which could kill on sight, but only with eye contact. Now there was no way to see. Tom pointed his wand at himself and barked, Anomaly removal. The exorcism charm, the kind used to dispel abnormal magical states, should have helped. In his youth, Tom had been adept at many branches of magic, even white magic, though he'd later discarded it for the dark arts. He assumed some curse or hex had blinded him. But the charm had no effect. If he'd been the one afflicted, even a powerful curse would show some reaction. This was different. The darkness was environmental. Nothing, natural or magical, could penetrate it. Ansu's deep darkness charm had swallowed the chamber. The basilisk's immense body unfurled and slithered, coils rubbing against stone as it hunted by scent and vibration. The hissing serpent flicked its forked tongue. Tom, used to commanding snakes, hissed in Parseltongue, trying to steady the beast. Don't panic. Use your senses. Smell them. Find them. Ted had thought this through. The companions wore protective helmets enchanted to block heat and scent, so the basilisk's probing snout found nothing. The snake extended its head, then drew back, confused. Nothing? Impossible, Tom hissed, a touch of panic in his voice. Longbottom, Weasley, you don't think you can hide in the dark, do you? I won't let you die quietly. Enjoy your last moments. He raged and taunted, hoping to force them into a mistake. Ignorant that Neville and Ron weren't fighting alone, everyone else was in position. The darkness swallowed his threats, leaving only his impotent fury echoing back. Ted used the lull to appraise the creature snarling in the black. Millennial, level 13. Magical creature, level 2 modified creature, level 1 millennial creature, attributes, strength 32, constitution 29, agility 8, intelligence 4, perception 13, spirit 7, charm 4, luck. Talents, death gaze, red, a gaze imbued with powerful magic. Eye contact instantly kills targets with magic resistance below level 5. and causes varying degrees of petrification or paralysis to targets with magic resistance level 5 and above. Longevity modification, blue, subject to dark arts modification, greatly extending hibernation and lifespan. Magic resistance, blue, further enhanced, +1 level to magic resistance. Unnatural creature, green, not naturally born, unaffected by some magics but severely affected by others, may 2 charm. Skills, magic resistance level 6, venom level 6, snake scales level 4, crushing level 3, tail whip level 3, devour level 3, scent level 2, heat sense level 2. Evaluation, Slytherin's personally modified pet, a dangerous basilisk, 1,000 years old, level 13 magical animal, system rates its challenge at level 16. With magic resistance level 6, it is virtually immune to most wizard spells. Tom watched the motionless dark warily. Then a flute note cut through the gloom, clear and melodic. Even Tom, who'd kept his guard taut, felt his muscles loosen at the sound. His hand lifted, his feet began to tap without his permission. The basilisk, coiled and wary, stopped too. Its tongue flicked, then it began to move strangely, stretching its neck, swaying its head, almost as if charmed by the melody. No, Tom snapped, but it was too late. The snake's body angled and twisted, following the invisible tune like the snakes in a snake charmer's basket. My body feels wrong. I can't control it. The basilisk would have seemed to say if it could. Ted had used his psionic power, amplified by his talent, sound of heartbeat, red, to play the mysterious dance flute, green. The layered effect created a temporary confusion in the basilisk's primitive mind, enough to buy time. While Tom gaped in disbelief and the monster danced, Neville and Ron silently withdrew under Ted's mental direction. The rest of the companions slipped into their assigned positions. "Stop! Stop it, you fool! Don't twist!" Tom screamed into the black, furious and helpless. Senior Tom was a genius. At such a young age, he was already probing advanced dark arts. Though he couldn't see, he silently cast a perception spell. He didn't find the enemy, but he immediately noticed the basilisk dancing oddly, and his anger flared. This wasn't what he expected. Why, aside from Parseltongue, could this strange flute music affect the basilisk? Tom searched for the source of the sound, but the opponent was clever. They weren't where the music seemed to come from, or perhaps the source was concealed. Fortunately, the basilisk had been roused by Tom's Parseltongue. It coiled nervously, uncertain what had happened. "You think that's enough, hiding in the dark?" Senior Tom sneered. Swarm of bats. A ball of magic flew from the tip of his wand and erupted into countless palm-sized bats that scattered in every direction. Ted, watching through his goggles, couldn't help but be impressed. Even this youthful Lord Voldemort had lightning reflexes and a deep spell repertoire. Summoning a swarm to flush out a hidden opponent in an instant was brilliant. Swarm of hornets, flock of birds. Hermione pushed her summoning spells to the limit. Summoning is a branch of transfiguration. Accio and other remote summons fall into it, and she had spent a semester improving. In Professor McGonagall's eyes, she was her most promising student. Countless hornets buzzed, and flocks of birds filled the ceiling, confusing sight and sound. At the same moment, Ron and Jerry raised their wands together. Piercing hex! Dozens, perhaps hundreds, of small pebbles shot out, slamming into the oncoming bat swarm. The passage turned into a hail of magical projectiles, bats, birds, hornets, and stones in a chaotic melee. One after another, the conjured animals dissipated after 20 or 30 seconds, dropping with dull thumps. Senior Tom laughed. "I should have guessed. You always stick together. Are you all here? Where's Ted?" He had spent enough time with Ron and Neville to know the 6 of them well, especially Ted, who Ron idolized and Neville respected. Rather than anger, Tom felt amusement at being outfoxed. "Perfect. All of you together." His smile went cruel. "Go! Kill them!" he hissed in Parseltongue. Under that command, the basilisk lashed out. It couldn't sense Ted and the others in the dark, but it obeyed, lifting its head and sweeping its massive tail. The tail, as thick as a water barrel, rose like a steamroller's drum and smashed a stone snake statue by the passage wall. Debris flew like cannonballs. In the darkness, unable to pinpoint its enemies, the basilisk began indiscriminate destruction. Jerry and Hermione dove behind one of the huge supporting pillars, hearts hammering as stone fragments clattered around them. Even without its lethal gaze, the basilisk's brute force was terrifying, A dragon might well lose a struggle with this creature. Ted, however, had a plan. Through their mental link, he sent a single command: begin. Ted silently cast an improved silencing spell, a soundproof barrier. Once it held, the team began their next move. At Ted's feet, a pale chill spread out, a new application of Frost Nova. He started pouring ice from a small textbook-sized box behind him. The box was made vast with an undetectable extension charm. Ted had paid 32 galleons for it and filled it with ice taken from the house elves' cold storage in the kitchens. He'd packed the equivalent of 7 or 8 freezers worth of ice and now dumped it out silently. In 30 or 40 seconds, the underground chamber grew noticeably colder. Ansu's dark domain still shrouded the area, so visibility stayed poor. Senior Tom, deprived of touch, didn't notice the temperature change. The basilisk, though, began to sense something amiss, a faint, unfamiliar chill. Hogwarts gets cold in winter, but this creature, created by Slytherin and later altered to hibernate and slow its metabolism, had hardly experienced cold in the same way as ordinary creatures. It had been roused only a few times last winter. True cold was alien to it. The basilisk hesitated, then coiled and watched. The longer it waited, the more numb it felt. Its scales began to bead with condensation. Despite its high magical resistance, it was still cold-blooded. Its physiology reacted. Ted's Frost Nova and the makeshift cold storage drove its body temperature down. Neville translated its hissing. "It says it's cold, very cold, and wants to go back to sleep." "Merlin's beard, these little wizards are playing dirty," Senior Tom snarled. He urged the basilisk with parcel tongue. "Don't just stand there. Move, crush every inch of the ground." The basilisk, reluctant, uncoiled, and slithered over the iron-cold stone floor. Its movement slowed with the chill, but stretched out. It was still over 20 meters long. If it rolled through them, they'd have nowhere to hide. The freezing slowed it, but didn't stop the threat. Inside the silencing barrier, Hermione cast warming charms to keep the group from losing feeling. The spells only kept them from trembling, a sign of how low the temperature already was. Even the basilisk's scales seemed to collect frost. Its magic resistance didn't prevent the physical drowsiness creeping over it. While the basilisk struggled with the cold, Ansu, who had remained motionless since spreading his dark domain, finally slid forward, moving silently toward the massive snake. At that moment, Ted pulled the prepared card from his sleeve, Promotion, read, and used it on Ansu. Chapter 180, Ansu's Ward-Hopping Kick, Spell Card. Temporarily boosts one of your summoned units. Lasts 10 minutes, cooldown 24 hours. The promotion card had been used on Ansu. For 10 breathless seconds, Ansu's form seemed to turn to black smoke, a twisted, incorporeal shadow. It spread shadowy wings and drifted toward the basilisk, which didn't even notice the movement. The shadow slipped over the basilisk's head as if a patch of night had swallowed it whole. The basilisk felt only a sudden chill on its face, then an agonizing, tearing pain in one eye socket. It roared. The sleepiness and sluggishness the cold had induced vanished at once. In the instant of that strike, the darkness that had been constraining the entire chamber dissipated. Ansu's dark domain magic faded with the attack. Most of the huge torches in the cavern had already been smashed by the frenzied serpent. Only a few guttered embers remained. In the dim light, the basilisk hissed again, trembling. One of its eyes was a bloody, empty socket, weeping black ichor. Ansu had clawed one of the basilisk's eyes out. The other eye, however, still glared orange and unscathed. Ansu had tried to take both, but after losing one eye, the basilisk had reacted quickly enough to dodge the second strike. The promotion card was part of the reason. Although it temporarily raised Ansu to the level of a top-tier magical creature, it hadn't significantly increased its physical size. Ansu simply couldn't seize both eyeballs at once. It had come painfully close. That would have been fine. Ted had a plan. The instant the darkness lifted and light flooded back, a spell flew from the shadows and struck the basilisk's head. With the basilisk's magic resistance in bulk, a typical charm would have barely registered. But this was Ted's eye disease curse, held back until now, a level 5 curse, all enchantments in place and unleashed at full force. When wizards elevate a curse to level 5, they usually adapt it to their strengths. Ted's own level 5 scouring charm, for example, could be fine-tuned to remove specific kinds of dirt He could even dust tofu with it. For the eye disease curse, Ted had poured everything into raw output, maximum pain and damage. Combined with Ted's current level 1 magical penetration, the spell hit true. The basilisk's lone orange eye slammed shut. Pain more intense than any it had felt before tore through its optic nerve into its skull. It went utterly mad, twisting, thrashing, rolling wildly across the floor, smashing and sweeping with tail and head alike. The carved Slytherin statue took a glancing blow and staggered, but it did not topple. It was no ordinary ornament. Tom, the senior, felt panic edge into his voice. He wasn't as powerful as he looked. His magic relied on squeezing energy from Malfoy, which was limited. He had been counting on the basilisk, on its gaze and overwhelming physical presence, to finish Ted and his friends. Now his greatest weapon was crippled. The eye disease curse wouldn't blind the creature outright, but it would prevent it from opening its eye and left it racked with agonizing pain. Tom snapped a command. "Bear with it. Ignore the pain. Kill them. They're not far." But the basilisk convulsed uncontrollably. The pain radiated from its optic nerve through its brain. It felt like it might burst. Parseltongue could no longer steady it. Tom's orders went unanswered. With the darkness gone and the basilisk incapacitated, Ted and his allies moved in. "Hit him!" Ted shouted. "Neville, hit him!" Neville responded. "Harry, hit him!" Harry echoed. "Ron, hit him!" Ron added. Neville was first to cast. "Expelliarmus!" he cried. But Tom was a senior. Even in his half-sane, cold-slowed state, he was far beyond a second year's competence. Neville's disarming charm was easily flicked aside by Tom, who redirected the spell to shatter the Slytherin statue behind him with a soft crack. A sneer curved Tom's mouth. He could handle second years like this. What he'd forgotten was that Neville really was a second year now. Then Harry fired a stupefy, and Ron launched a slug-vomiting charm in tandem. Tom sidestepped the stupefy, but Ron's trick was clever, designed to block any safe avenue of escape. The pair of attacks forced Tom to waste magic in a shield charm just to stay upright. Ron's spell struck the shield and failed to hit Tom directly. Instead, it exploded against the barrier into a sticky, mucousy glob of slug snot that slid down the shield and splattered to the floor. Tom's face contorted with disgust and fury. "Damn Weasley! How dare you use such filthy magic?" he spat. "Diffindo!" Ron had a history with this charm. After a humiliating howler and an unlucky Quidditch incident that had left him vomiting slugs, he'd confided in the sympathetic older student in a diary. Tom had even taught Ron refinements and variations to gain his trust. Now that backfired lesson threatened to be smeared on him. When Tom cast Diffindo in anger, Ron had already dived behind a stone pillar, still cringing at the memory of that older, menacing influence. Tom's curse struck the pillar, blowing the 1-meter diameter column into flying rubble. Ron's ears rang, but he was otherwise unhurt. Neville and Harry pressed the advantage. Harry unleashed a modified whirlwind charm he'd learned from Sirius, a compact tornado about 3 meters tall and less than a meter across, that roared toward Tom. This charm was enhanced. It lasted far longer, covered more area, and even tracked a target. Faced with it, Tom had to abandon any immediate pursuit of Ron and cast a finite incantum to shatter the vortex. While Tom dealt with that, Neville reached into his extension pouch and hauled out a huge pile of plants he'd been cultivating: mushrooms, biting cabbages, venomous tentacula, and a writhing mat of devil's snare. It was like a chaotic, enchanted vegetable garden spilling into the chamber. "Engorgement charm," Neville commanded. He was practiced in herbology, and his charms made the plants surge with growth. He cast it again and again. The fungal puffballs swelled to the size of small houses, their grinning caps bursting with light purple bubbles. The venomous tentacula and devil's snare vines lunged and writhed, shooting tendrils across the floor. Even the biting cabbages hopped forward with a chorus of snapping leaves. Tom only scoffed. In school, divination had been his worst subject and herbology his neglected one. Later, when he delved into the dark arts and brewed nasty potions, he'd preferred exotic ingredients over humble herbs. He considered these plants foolish, slow, and childish. As the enchanted produce crawled toward him, Tom's grin widened with contempt. "Ha," he said, venom in his tone. "The boy who lived, so this is all your little tricks?